Chapter 1836. As the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Noah, Claire, Lindsley, Frianna, and Alice were all accommodated in the High Worship Hall, waiting for the celebration at night. After Lacia excused herself, she had the witches of the Divine Ceremonial Courtyard prepare rooms for Noah and the others. Thus, Noah and the others directly moved to the room assigned to Noah. However, at this moment, in the middle of this rather spacious room, there was a very complicated and mysterious magic array. Around the magic array, there were small altars. On each of the altars, there was a burning candle flame. And in the middle of the magic array, a young elven girl with water-like sky-blue waist-length hair was lying on the ground with a tranquil expression. Seeing the young elven girl lying on the ground, Claire, Lindsley, Frianna, and Alice looked at each other in dismay. "Hey, Noah." Frianna couldn't help but ask. "Is this child really the Water Elf Queen?" "How would I know?" Noah said irresponsibly. "Anyway, that's what Lotus said when she saw this child. The Elf Queen of Calamity also tried to kill her at the beginning. It wasn't easy for me to protect her. If you tell me that this child isn't the Water Elf Queen, then even I will complain, right?" Although that was what she said, Noah was basically certain that this young elven girl was the Water Elf Queen. Not only because he had seen the Water Elf Queen in the Hall of Truth and Lotus had promised to release her, but also because this young elven girl had mentioned the otherworld darkness more than once when her memory was stimulated in the abandoned city. That terrified look was still fresh in Noah's mind. If this young elven girl wasn't the Water Elf Queen, even Noah wouldn't believe it. "I know you don't believe it." Noah spread out his hands. "In short, first use the unsealing ceremony to undo the seal on this child. When she recovers her memory, then the truth will be revealed." Or, is there a problem with the unsealing ceremony? There's no problem with the unsealing ceremony, but if you want to use the unsealing ceremony to undo the seal, you must know the real name of the unsealing target. Frianna said. "If the name is fake, then no matter what, you can't undo the seal." Obviously, Frianna still didn't dare to believe it. In this regard, Noah didn't explain further and directly said, "You can begin now." "Okay." Frianna nodded helplessly. "Then let's begin." After saying that, Frianna's expression became serious. That expression faintly revealed a noble temperament. However, that was the expression that a former fairy concubine candidate should have. Then, under everyone's gaze, Viviana slowly stepped forward and came to the back of the elf girl lying on the ground, facing Noah and the others. Then, Viviana closed her eyes and slowly opened her hand toward the elf girl lying in front of her. "Thou, Isalia Shiva, is hereby liberated." The moment that clear voice sounded, Frianna's entire body fluctuated with dense divine power. Boom! The candlelight on the surrounding altars suddenly swelled like an explosion, igniting the altars one by one and slowly burning them. Clank! The magic array drawn on the ground began to bloom with dazzling light. The light was like a torrent, converging on the body of the elf queen lying in the center of the magic array. Hum! At this moment, the space around the elven girl suddenly trembled, causing her body to flash with a dazzling light. Ugh! The elf queen's tranquil expression suddenly distorted, revealing a painful expression. Seeing this scene, Claire, Lindley, and Alice's group all trembled. It's moving." Alice cried out in panic. "She moved." "Stupid, idiot." Lindley seemed to be startled by Alice's shout. "Don't scare me. That's not a doll. Of course she can move." Claire complained. "Alice. Don't make a fuss over nothing, okay?" Saying this, Claire, Lindley, and Alice all became visibly agitated due to their nervousness. After all, the one lying in front of them wasn't an ordinary elf, not even an ordinary humanoid elf, but a god who ruled the entire world, the Elf King. If a god appeared in front of them, no one would be able to remain calm, right? At this moment, the group of girls fell into extreme nervousness due to their emotions. Only Noah, who was staring at the elven girl's pained expression, didn't miss the elven girl's soft, mosquito-like murmurs. Darkness. Darkness. The elf queen's delicate body trembled as she murmured in a dreamlike voice. Darkness is devouring me. Hearing these murmurs clearly, Noah's eyes rippled slightly. The excited Claire, Linley, and Alice seemed to have finally heard the elven girl's murmur. They all held their breaths. Darkness? Claire murmured. Could it be the otherworldly darkness that Noah mentioned that would drive the elf king crazy? This means. Alice began to feel uneasy. Is this child really the elf king? The elf king. Linley looked at the child she had met by chance in the underground maze with a complicated expression. I didn't expect this child to be the elf king. Fianna also seemed to be shaken, but she displayed the qualities of an excellent witch of the divine ceremonial court. After a while, she regained her composure and continued to pray and bless with her eyes closed. Under such circumstances, the light of the magic array drawn on the ground became more and more intense, and the surrounding altars burned even more fiercely. On the contrary, the elf queen's pained expression began to disappear little by little, and her expression returned to its original tranquility. However, everyone present had a feeling. Undoubtedly, it was exactly the same expression as before. But as the unsealing ceremony progressed, that tranquil expression made the elf queen emit an indescribable temperament. That temperament was ancient and tranquil, with an extraordinary feeling. Looking at that tranquil and tender face, everyone had a thought in their minds. The person in front of them was an incomparably honorable and noble existence. Clang, the rich light began to dissipate little by little. Phew, the surrounding altars had been burned to ashes, leaving only a pile of dust. Fianna slowly opened her eyes, looked at the peacefully sleeping elf queen, and murmured softly. Yu Shen, please wake up. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone saw it clearly. The eyes of the elf queen lying on the ground trembled a few times, and then she gently opened them. Like an ordinary girl, the elf queen looked around with a somewhat dazed expression. Seeing this, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice all looked as if they didn't know what to do, and focused their gazes on Noah. Noah shrugged, stepped forward, squatted down in front of the elf queen, and said so. How do you feel? You. The elf queen stared blankly at Noah, and then seemed to have recovered, and murmured. So that's how it is. Did I accept the unsealing ceremony? Miss Elf? Linley, who was hiding behind Noah, hesitated for a moment before asking tentatively. Do you still remember me? I remember you. The elf queen nodded. We met in the underground maze of the abandoned city. Is that so? Linley let out a sigh of relief. That's really great. But our goal is to let you recover all your memories. Noah stared at the elf queen, and asked. So, have you recovered your memories? Don't worry. The elf queen slightly closed her eyes, and said faintly. It's already recovered. After saying this, the elf queen gradually got up, and faced Noah's group. Her voice was like a clear drop of water falling into a jade plate, pleasing to the ear, and lightly reverberating in all directions. I am the elf queen of water Isalia Shiva. Chapter 1837. In the room, an indescribable silence pervaded the air. Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice were sitting around a table, but no one spoke. Their expressions showed that they wanted to say something, but didn't know what to say. They looked like they were in a dilemma. Noah was sitting opposite the group of girls. Beside Noah was the elf queen, whose real name was Isalia Shiva. Her real body was the water elemental that governed this world. She was also sitting upright. Her gaze swept across the group of girls. Brave witches, thank you for helping me. Unfortunately, I can't give you my blessings right now. I can only ask for your understanding. Hearing Isalia's words, the group of girls waved their hands and shook their heads in fear. We didn't do anything. Claire said awkwardly. It was Noah and Linsley who helped Madame Isalia escape. It was Fianna who helped Madame unseal. Alice and I didn't help at all. Yes. Alice lowered her head in embarrassment. Therefore, we don't have the qualifications to receive the Elf Queen's thanks and blessings. Please don't say that. I also didn't help at all. Lindsley said dejectedly. It was Noah who helped Miss Elf. Madame Isalia come out of the underground maze. I only watched from the side. What I did was also insignificant. Fianna hurriedly said. I was only in charge of the unsealing ceremony. There are many people in the mystic ritual courtyard who can perform the ceremony. I just happened to help a little. Clearly, in front of Isalia, the group of girls still felt quite nervous. It couldn't be helped. Who told the person sitting there to be the Water Elf Queen? The Elf Queen usually stayed in the Hall of Sacrifice, silently managing the entire world. Even if there was something, she would give orders through the elf concubines who served her directly. Humans simply couldn't meet the Elf Queen directly. The only people who could meet the Elf Queen directly were the elf envoys who won the elf sword dance ceremony. Sitting at the same table and chatting with the Elf King like this was something that had never happened before. Thus, how could the girls not feel nervous and terrified? Of course, the girls would no longer doubt Isalia's identity. After all, the unsealing ceremony was a ritual magic that required the elf's true name to undo the seal. Since the ritual worked on Isalia, then the name Isalia Shiva was undoubtedly the real name of the elf girl in front of him. Throughout both the human world and the elemental elf world, there was only one being with this name. That was the Water Spirit King. He was the one who controlled the water element and stood at the top of the world. While the young ladies were panicking, Isalia said, Don't worry, I'm not going to give you a chance. You don't have to be so cautious. Although I'm the Elven King, I'm just a clone right now. I'm not the main body that governs this world. Doppelganger? Claire, Linley, Fianna, Alice, and the other girls were slightly stunned. A doppelganger? Noah turned to look at Isalia. What's going on? To be more specific, the state of my existence is still incomplete, Isalia said. Although my memories have been restored, I still feel a little scattered. Almost all of my power is left in the main body. The power that this body can use is too weak. Is that so? The four girls, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice, seemed to be a little confused. However, Noah understood what was going on. Lotus once said that 3 years ago, in the Hall of Sacrifice, she only destroyed the crazed personality of the Water Spirit King and released the original personality of the Water Spirit King. In other words, Lotus's target had always been the Elf King's personality. The Water Spirit King's personality that was released by Lotus formed this doppelganger. It was separated from its power and in a state of amnesia, it reincarnated in the underground maze of the abandoned city. Therefore, the Isalia in front of him was only a doppelganger. She only recovered her memories and her power was left in the main body. The portion that could be used was relatively small. However, even so, Noah's sensing ability could still detect a deep divine power from Isalia's body. That divine power energy was probably not weaker than that of an ordinary highest elf. After all, she was the Elf King. Even if the remaining power was pitifully little, she was still much stronger than the average elf. As for her memories, Isalia also said that although she had recovered them, there were still scattered parts. Immediately, Noah asked, Then do you still remember what happened before you reincarnated in the underground maze? I don't remember very clearly. Isalia frowned slightly and said in a very uncertain tone. I only vaguely remember that 3 years ago, in the Hall of Sacrifice, someone rescued me from being imprisoned in the darkness and let me be free. This sentence made the group of girls hold their breaths. Lady Isalia, Linley said with a trembling voice. Did the Elf Kings really go crazy? Although it's not something to be proud of, unfortunately, it's the truth. Isalia was silent for a moment and then sighed. It's not just me. The rest of the Elf Kings have been swallowed by the darkness, and have completely fallen into a state of madness. At present, it seems that they have stopped their activities because of my liberation. Otherwise, not to mention the elemental elf world, even the human world would be affected by the crazy elf kings. Disasters would constantly emerge and human residences would be destroyed one by one. How? How could it be? Alice was extremely incredulous. Even the elf kings can't do anything about the darkness? Fianna felt a little cold. Is it because of this that sister betrayed the elf kings? Claire bit her lips tighter and tighter. For a moment, the atmosphere in the air became heavy. No one thought that Iselia was an alarmist. The elf kings brought great disasters to the human world. It had happened more than a few times in history. Storms, earthquakes, floods, volcanic eruptions. These great natural disasters, in this world, were almost all caused by something that offended the elf kings and caused the elf kings to be angry. Therefore, if the elf kings really went crazy and brought the disasters mentioned above to the human world one after another, the consequences, just thinking about it, made the girls shudder. If it's only a disaster level, then it's still okay. Iselia closed her eyes. If we elf kings continue to be eroded by the darkness of the other world, we will eventually destroy the world with our own hands, whether it's the elemental elf world or the human world. The cruel reality made the faces of the group of girls turn slightly pale. If that were to happen, not to mention the elves, even the humans would be heading towards the end of the world, right? Facing the disaster of the entire world, the 4 human elves were really too insignificant. So small that Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice couldn't even breathe. At this time, only one voice was still indifferent. Don't talk about the destruction of the world. The world is stronger than you think. Even if it's the elf kings, how could it be so easy to destroy the world? That one sentence made all the girls present, including Iselia, stunned. Without giving the girls a chance to react, Noah turned his eyes and looked at Iselia. After tonight's celebration, we will go to the Hall of True Sacrifice to make a wish. At that time, I will liberate the rest of the elf kings. The girls trembled. Even Iselia couldn't help but look at Noah and say so. Can you do it? Don't worry. Noah curled his lips and smiled. As long as the opponent isn't a human, or doesn't have a deep relationship with humans, then no matter how powerful the elf kings are, there won't be any problems. No matter who heard Noah's words, they would think that he was arrogant. If the elf kings were so easy to deal with, then why would they govern the elements and support the existence of the world? However, it had to be said that Noah's words made everyone's heart surge with courage. Iselia looked at Noah and nodded after a while. At that time, I will also go with you. Noah nodded. Chapter 1838. As a result, time began to pass slowly, and gradually, dusk arrived. Not long after, the celebration for the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival would begin. At that time, the various nobles from various countries in the human realm would gather at the banquet to bless the winners. That was the custom after every Elven Sword Dance Festival. Of course, although it was said to be a blessing, it was actually just a verbal blessing without any actual effect. However, at that time, the 5 elven concubines who directly served the 5 elven kings would also be present to provide the elven king and the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival with sacred music, praying for the elven king to continue protecting the humans and to bless the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Of course, the people who were busy with these matters didn't know. No matter how much they prayed for the elven king's protection, if this continued, the world would sooner or later be destroyed by the elven king's hands. As the saying goes, sometimes, ignorance was a blessing. At least, the people didn't have to worry about the unwarranted end of the world. They could still happily prepare for the banquet and enjoy the last moment of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. As one of the winners, Noah only needed to wait for the banquet to begin before making his grand entrance. That would be enough. Unfortunately, Noah didn't have the slightest interest in this so-called celebration. What Noah really wanted to do could only be done after the celebration ended. Staying in his room, Noah changed into his formal attire while holding the silver dagger and platinum dagger that were placed on the bedside table. Although it's troublesome, I still have to show my face at the banquet. Unfortunately, I can't bring weapons to the banquet. Noah spoke to the 2 daggers in his hands. Aster, Athena, I'll temporarily keep you in the gift card. As soon as he finished speaking, Aster and Athena's voices sounded in Noah's mind at the same time. I hope Master can quickly take me out. I don't like the space in the card. Aster, I don't mind. With your current strength, it will only be a loss without me. Sooner or later, you will need me. Athena, Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the 2 completely different answers. Immediately after, Noah materialized the gift card. After keeping the Demon Slayer and Heavenly Sword into the gift card, he cancelled the materialization of the gift card. In the absence of the Gate of Babylon, the convenience of the gift card will be revealed. The function of the gift card was almost the same as the Gate of Babylon, which was a treasure trove. The difference was that the gift card could not be used like the Gate of Babylon, which could open the entrance of the treasury at any time and place, and use the weapons in the treasury as throwing props. However, the gift card was not inferior in terms of its function as a treasury. After all, the space in the gift card was also unlimited. Although it could only store gifts and daily necessities, it was much more convenient for storing items than carrying them around. As for the gift card itself, it could be instantiated or cancelled at any time. The way to carry the gift card differed from person to person. Some people would choose to put the gift card in a safe place and summon it and send it back at any time. Some people would choose to vaporize the gift card and merge it into the space. Even if it was somewhere else, it could still be materialized at any time. Noah's way of carrying the gift card was to merge it into his body. After all, Noah often needed to travel between different worlds. If he used the 2 methods mentioned above, he would not be able to summon and materialize it through the world's barrier. Therefore, merging it into his body was undoubtedly a good method. After putting away the elven device and cancelling the gift card and merging it into his body, Noah looked at the sky. It was dusk. The celebration would be held at night. There was still plenty of time. There's still some time. I'll go check on that silly girl. After saying this, Noah walked out of the room and headed in another direction. Because they were all winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, the distance between Noah's room and the other girl's room was not too far. Although the area of the Great Sacrificial Hall was quite large, Noah only took 30 seconds of slow walking to reach the door of his destination. Looking at the door in front of him, Noah reached out his hand. But before he could knock on the door, a voice came from inside the door. Sister. Congratulations on winning. Thank you, Milleryo. Lynn Silei, congratulations on winning. Thank you, Mila. Sob sob sob, it's great that Milady won. Don't cry, Carol. It's embarrassing. Upon hearing the voice coming from the room, Noah couldn't help but laugh. He didn't knock on the door and just said, "Come in." Lindsley, I'm coming in. Suddenly, the sound in the room disappeared. Noah. Lindsley's voice changed. Wait. However, before Lindsley could say anything, Noah had already opened the door and barged in. The next moment, Noah saw a scene that made Noah's eyes light up. He saw that in the middle of Lindsley's room, a real milady was standing there. She wasn't wearing her usual Elven Academy uniform. Instead, she was wearing a navy blue evening gown. Her dazzling light blonde hair was tied up. She seemed to have put on some light makeup on her delicate face, making her lovable face even more gorgeous and moving. As for her pink lips, she seemed to have applied some lipstick, giving her lips a rose-like color, which made her look quite charming. Such a well-dressed milady suddenly entered Noah's eyes, making Noah stunned. Really? Lindsley called out shyly. Didn't I tell you to wait? Why? Noah walked in, praising as he walked. Doesn't it look good? But, I was going to wait until the banquet started to show you. Lindsley puffed up her cheeks as if she was throwing a tantrum. Then there won't be any surprises. What are you talking about? Noah praised. I'm already surprised enough, really. Is that so? Lindsley was a little embarrassed, turning her head away. Hee hee. Carol snickered at the side. Milady really wants Mr. Noah to see this outfit the most. Carol. Lindsley's face was red as she hammered Carol's back. A petite girl next to Carol trotted over and threw herself into Noah's arms. Brother Noah. Her small head buried directly into Noah's abdomen, almost knocking Noah over. Milady. Lindsley said angrily. You can't do this kind of unladylike behavior. However, Milady completely ignored her sister. She raised her head and smiled at Noah like a flower. I watched all of Brother Noah's matches. It was really amazing. Brother's sword dance was really, really cool. Really? Noah smiled and patted Milady's head. Did you like it? I did, Milady said bluntly. And Mira liked it too. Just as she finished speaking, the back of her collar was grabbed by Mira, who suddenly appeared behind her and lifted her up. Congratulations on winning, Noah. Mira ignored the struggling Milady, and a rare smile appeared on her pretty face. Your sword dance was really amazing. You even defeated the strongest sword dancer and received the same honor as Liena Subble. It's really amazing. The absolute sword envoy of Black and White, this title will soon be known throughout the continent. Carol said with a smile. Mr. Noah will soon have a lot of fans. Like the strongest sword dancer, he will become the idol of all the elves on the continent. And, brother also helped sister win. Milady's smile became even brighter. This way, Sister Eudia will be able to come out of the cursed ice. Lindsley's expression instantly froze. The atmosphere became uncomfortable. Chapter 1839. In fact, Noah was also helpless. It wasn't strange for Lindley to have such a reaction. It was because in the end, Lindley's younger sister who was sealed in the cursed ice was still unable to be rescued. Lindley's second sister had made some mistakes when she was sacrificing herself to the Water Fairy King. She had incurred the wrath of the Water Fairy King, which was why she had been sealed in cursed ice. Therefore, Noah originally thought that as long as the seal on Isalia's body was broken, as the instigator, Isalia, as the Water Sprite King, shouldn't mind helping Lindley to break the cursed ice on Yusha's body. However, Noah's plan was wrong. There were two things that went wrong. Firstly, Isalia was currently only a clone, and most of her power remained on the side of the main body, so she couldn't break the curse on Yusha. Secondly, the cursed ice on Yusha's body wasn't simple. My memories are still somewhat scattered, but if that witch G was really sealed in the cursed ice because she made some mistakes during the sacrifice, then it couldn't have been done by me. I wouldn't be angry over a simple sacrifice, so that was probably what I did when I was in a state of madness. This was what Isalia told Noah to Lindley after knowing about Lindley's younger sister. In other words, the person who sealed Yusha in the cursed ice, even if it was Isalia, wasn't her original intention, but her rampage during a state of madness. If I still have my power now, then it shouldn't be difficult to break the curse. Unfortunately, I can't do it now. I can only wait until I return to my main body and see what happens. Noah still remembered how disappointed Lindley's face was when Isalia said this. But that was to be expected. In order to break the curse on her younger sister, Lindley didn't hesitate to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival with a strong determination. It wasn't easy for her to obtain victory and make a wish to save her younger sister, but in the end, she received such bad news. Fortunately, it wasn't that there was no way, but it couldn't be realized at the moment. As a result, Lindley could only swallow this bitterness. However, Milleryu didn't know about this. This child must have been waiting for her eldest sister to rescue her second sister from the eternal ice seal, right? Under such circumstances, Lindley simply couldn't explain it to her youngest sister. The fact that the Elf King had gone mad could not be publicized. But even if Lin Silei told Mireia that there was no way to save Eudia for the time being, Mireia would definitely be very disappointed even if she could understand. As an elder sister, Lindley usually looked like she cared a lot about her face, but deep down, she was indeed a gentle and virtuous girl. Linley probably didn't want to see her younger sister's disappointed look, so she didn't know how to explain this matter. Noah looked at Mireia and rescued her from Myra's hands, placing her on the ground. Don't worry. Noah squatted down and reached out his hand to pat Malaja's head. Lindsay Lay will definitely save your second sister. Malayu nodded heavily, her little face brimming with happiness. On the other hand, Linley's expression became extremely complicated. Eldest miss? Carol noticed Linley's expression and asked curiously. What's wrong? Linley didn't seem to know how to answer Carol's question and fell silent for a moment. This made Carol worried instead. Even Milayu blinked her eyes and moved forward in confusion. Sister? What's wrong? Before Milayu could reach Linley, Mira stepped forward and held her hand. Linley should have something important to discuss with Noah. Let's go out first and not disturb them. Mira seemed to have noticed something. Although she was very young, only 13 years old, Mira was appointed as the leader of the Lipa division by the Russell Bell Duchy. Her mind was much better than the average person of her age. Sensing that Noah and Linley seemed to be hiding something, Mira very considerately covered for the two of them. Is that so? Milayu didn't seem to suspect anything and nodded repeatedly. Then we'll go out first. Yes. Carol took Milayu's other hand and winked mischievously at Noah. We'll go out first and not disturb Mr. Noah and eldest miss relationship. This trashy maid who even needs her master to take care of her meals and sleep misunderstood. Mira only glanced at Noah and nodded at Noah. Then, Mira, Carol, and Milayu walked out of Linley's room while laughing and chatting. The entire room returned to silence. Noah and Linley could only watch the three girls leave. For a moment, they didn't say anything, causing the silent atmosphere to become somewhat uncomfortable. After a while, Linley spoke with a complicated expression. I don't know how to tell Milayu about Yudia. I know. Noah nodded without any surprise. If it were me, seeing my sister so happy and looking forward to it, I wouldn't have the heart to disappoint her. What should I do? Linley's eyes began to fill with tears. Even Lady Isalia can't break the cursed ice, then what can we do to save Yudia? Isalia just hasn't recovered her strength yet. It's not impossible to save your sister. Noah turned his head and looked at Linley. When everything is over, your sister will naturally be rescued from the cursed ice. Everything is over? How long do we have to wait? Linley said with some sadness. Even the Elven King can't deal with that otherworldly darkness. Even if Lady Isalia recovers her strength, can she resist the erosion of the otherworldly darkness and end everything? That's something I need to consider. Noah smiled indifferently. You just need to quietly wait for the good news. Wait? Linley was a little anxious. But I've already waited. Before she could finish her sentence, Lindsay couldn't speak anymore. Because Noah suddenly stretched out a finger and covered Linley's rosy lips. While Linley was still in a daze, Noah looked directly at the girl in front of him. His eyes were like gemstones, and his dark pupils seemed to be able to suck people in, shining like the stars in the sky. Looking at Noah like this, Linley couldn't help but be a little absent-minded. Immediately, Noah opened his mouth. Do you still remember what happened in the kitchen when we returned to the academy? Noah's words made Linley come back to her senses, and her pretty face turned red. Not only did she feel embarrassed for looking at Noah's intoxicated past, but she also felt ashamed when she recalled what happened at that time. How could Linley forget what happened at that time? Because that was the only time in the life of this rich young miss being kissed by the opposite sex. That was Linley's first kiss. Moreover, the significance of kisses to elves and elven envoys was equally extraordinary. Kissing is the most sacred contract and ritual. Noah smiled slightly, and his finger gently rubbed Linley's seductive lips. At that time, I made a contract with you that I would definitely win the Elven Sword Dance Festival and save your sister. Now, the victory of the Elven Sword Dance Festival has been obtained, and the only thing left is to save your sister. Noah looked at Linley, and said word by word. At that time, I will abide by the contract. After tonight, I will let everything end, so leave your sister to me. Noah's words made Linley's gaze unable to leave Noah's face. Linley's pretty face was slightly red, and in the end, she only said this sentence. Can I trust you? Hearing this, Noah shrugged. Why don't you let me swear the oath again? After speaking, Noah held Linley's little hand, and gently kissed the back of her hand. Your sister will definitely be saved, trust me. Linley's cheeks became even redder. However, that delicate and pretty face was like a blooming flower, and a beautiful smile appeared on it. Chapter 1840. Night gradually arrived. With the arrival of the night, the nobles from the various countries of the continent began to appear one by one in the hall of the Great Sacrificial Hall. It was different from the previous competitions. At this moment, the hall of the Great Sacrificial Hall wasn't decorated to be as lively and solemn as a festival. Instead, it was decorated to be like a ball. On the ceiling, the chandelier made of elven ore emitted a gentle light. The surrounding walls were covered with luxurious hanging curtains. The floor was covered with a red carpet that people couldn't bear to step on. Long tables were placed in every corner of the hall, with plates of dishes and bottles of fine wine placed on them. The atmosphere was completely different from the previous lively atmosphere. However, with the appearance of the nobles one by one, the scene gradually became more lively. Everyone was happily discussing the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Even though there weren't any vulgar people present and the discussion wasn't that intense, one could more or less understand the emotions of the nobles who were dressed in formal attire and had impassioned expressions. There was only one topic that everyone was discussing. I didn't think that the Osea Empire would win this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. When I heard that the strongest sword dancer didn't represent the Osea Empire, I thought that the Osea Empire wouldn't be able to win this time. In the end, the Osea Empire still won. Should I say, as expected of the strongest country on the continent that is on par with the Holy Taija Kingdom? Including this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival, the Elven Sword Dance Festival had been held 4 times in the past 30 years. The first time was 24 years ago and the winner was the 15-year-old Grey Vass. The second time was 15 years ago and the winner was an elven envoy from the Holy Taija Kingdom. The third time was 3 years ago and the winner was Lotus, who represented the Osea Empire. The fourth time was this year and the winners were Noah, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice. In other words, including this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival, the Osea Empire had won 3 times in the past 30 years. However, that didn't mean that the Osea Empire was amazing. What good luck, Osea Empire. Exactly. No matter if it's the strongest sword dancer or that male elf, strictly speaking, they're not from the Audisia Empire. But both of them represented the Ordesian Empire in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and even won. If it wasn't for the Dusk Witch holding the fort, I'm afraid the kingdom of Odisia would be finished. Not to mention, the lost elf concubine of the Odisia Empire's royal family is also part of the winning team. Previously, we were abandoned by the royal family of the Odisia Empire, but this time, we won a beautiful victory. I'm afraid the royal family won't look good, right? That's why I said that the Odisia Empire was just lucky. How ironic. That was how others saw the Austrian Empire's victory. Of course, there was some jealousy in it, but the content of the topic was not without reason. No matter what, Noah and Lotus weren't from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They were just representing the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In other words, the Austro-Hungarian Empire's 2 victories in the Elven Sword Dance Festival were only because they had external help. Moreover, it was not wrong to say that they relied on the Dusk Witch to hold the fort. After all, both Noah and Lotus had participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival because of Grey and Vaz. If it wasn't for Grey and Vaz, Noah and Lotus wouldn't have represented the Austro-Hungarian Empire in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. On top of that, Princess Fayanna had been demoted to a lost elven concubine, and was even abandoned by the royal family. This time, Fayanna had obtained victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, giving the royal family of the kingdom a resounding slap in the face. In the eyes of others, the kingdom of 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 the kingdom. Therefore, in this victory celebration, most of the guests were criticizing the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Of course, no one had any opinions about the winner. Under such circumstances, Noah and Lindsley arrived at the entrance of the celebration. Ahem. Lindsley coughed deliberately and casually put her hand on Noah's arm. Noah was slightly startled. He turned his head and glanced at Lindsley, but he only saw Lindsley looking forward as if she had done nothing. However, Noah didn't miss the blush on Lindsley's pretty face. Therefore, Noah couldn't help but laugh in his heart. He brought the cute girl who was holding his arm and walked into the celebration. Their appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. Look, the winner's team is here. That's the only male elf user on the continent? Is that the daughter of the Lorenfrost family next to him? What about the white sword user of the black and white sword users? Other than the strongest sword dancer, there's actually an elf user with such powerful sword dance skills. This is really unexpected. Should we go over and say hello? But, that's a male, although it's a little scary. Isn't his sword dance very cool? Yeah. I want to say hello to him. How should I do that? You ask me, I don't know. If I knew, I would have already gone over. The young ladies of the royal family and aristocratic families were whispering to each other. They looked at Noah with fear as usual, but there was also a longing and reverence that had not been there in the past. Just like what Carol had said. Using the same sword dance as the strongest sword dancer, Noah's status in everyone's hearts rose steadily, and he had many fans. Back then, Lotus had captured the hearts of all the elf users with her gorgeous and wonderful sword dance. Now, Noah had displayed his skills in the elf sword dance festival and even won. Naturally, those innocent ladies had a whole new level of respect for him. However, Noah did not pay attention to those ladies who were talking about him. Instead, he looked around the venue. The hall was not only filled with nobles from various countries, but also the contestants of the elf sword dance festival. Whether it was the preliminaries or the finals, all the elf users who attended the elf sword dance festival seemed to have participated in this celebration. Because, after the celebration, the elf sword dance festival would officially come to an end. Therefore, those contestants who did not attend the dance and the festival before also went on stage and would return to their countries in a few days. Among them, Noah also saw many familiar faces. However, he could not find the person he was looking for. Linley seemed to know who Noah was looking for and could not help but speak. Are you looking for Lady Lotus Asubble? Before the competition ended, Lotus said that she would temporarily stay on the floating island until Noah went to the Hall of True Sacrifice to see the Elf King. Therefore, Noah also wondered if he could see Lotus here. Unfortunately, Lotus still did not come. Lotus was not the only one who did not come. The members of the Purgatory Apostles, who represented the Alphys Empire to attend the Elf Sword Dance Festival, also did not come. As expected, those people won't come, right? Noah shrugged. Other than Lotus, almost everyone else can't be seen in the light. We have no choice but to appear. Linley pursed her lips. After a while, when the elf concubines are done with the sacrifice, we have to go to the Hall of True Sacrifice to see the Elf King. As he said that, Noah clearly felt it. Linley's hand that was still in his arm seemed to be trembling slightly. Was it nervousness? Or fear? Noah did not know. However, Noah would not be surprised. Because, next, everyone would not be meeting the Elf King who could fulfill everyone's wishes, but a group of madmen who would sooner or later destroy the world. Whether it was nervousness or fear, it was human nature. Noah could only gently hold Linley's little hand and said so. Don't worry, Isalia will be there. Even if she has lost most of her power, it should not be a problem to ensure your safety. Before Linley could answer, another voice sounded behind Noah. Are you in any trouble? Chapter 1841. The sudden voice startled both Noah and Linley. They immediately turned around and looked behind them. In the next moment, both Linley and Noah were completely stunned. Behind Noah and Linley, a gorgeously dressed young lady was standing there. It was a beautiful young lady in a purple evening gown. The evening gown on the young lady was the type that exposed her slender shoulders and had some embellishments in the front. Her voluptuous upper body and beautiful figure were perfectly accentuated. Many of the male nobles in the hall couldn't help but turn their gazes over with some amazement in their eyes. However, Noah wasn't stunned because of the young lady's beauty. In Noah's impression, the young lady in front of him was radiant with a valiant and battle-hardened side. She wasn't like the refined young lady of a noble family who displayed an incomparably gentle side. The newcomer was Her Highness the Dragon Dukedom of Doragonia Leola. You. Noah said almost subconsciously. Why are you dressed like this? Is it strange for me to dress like this? Leola's beautiful pair of brows furrowed slightly. Since it's a ball, isn't it normal to wear an evening gown? That's true. Noah scratched his cheeks and laughed bitterly. It's just that I didn't expect you to wear an evening gown. I thought you would hate to dress like this. For a knight and warrior like Leola who followed her battle instincts, in Noah's opinion, even if she was allowed to wear an evening gown, she would definitely refuse to wear it with the reason of, it's inconvenient to move around and won't do any good in battle. Forget it. Therefore, Leola's valiant appearance really surprised Noah. Meanwhile, Leola's brows furrowed deeper and deeper as she spoke expressionlessly. I know that this dress doesn't suit me. It's normal for you to feel strange. No, you're mistaken. Noah expressed his thoughts frankly. It looks pretty good on you. Remember to wear it often in the future. Wah. Leola's expressionless appearance disappeared without a trace. Her beautiful face couldn't help but blush. Don't think that you can make me happy with your flowery words. I won't fall for it. Although that was what she said, Leola's behavior didn't seem like she could remain calm. Noah looked at Leola with interest, but in the next second, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in the soft flesh of his waist. Humph. Lynn Silei snorted coldly and turned her head away. Her delicate face was filled with hatred that anyone could see. Noah could only bitterly touch his soft flesh that had been pinched so hard that it hurt. Could it be that this girl also thinks that I'm just using flowery words to deceive this innocent little girl? Even the heavens could take pity on. Moreover, if he didn't say that, he would be embarrassed himself. After all, during the Elven Sword Dance Festival, Noah had taken advantage of Leola in order to obtain the magical stones on her body after the battle was decided. Therefore, he should at least say a few nice words, right? Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but glance at Leola's ample bosom before quickly shifting his gaze away. He had to admit that this Dragon Duchess of the Dragon Duchy of Laguna was really something. How did I reach my hand out so calmly at that time? She didn't seem to be that calm. Just as Noah was bitterly touching his waist, Leola finally came to her senses. She coughed dryly and looked at Noah. I think I will remember the sword dance with you for the rest of my life. Now that you are on par with the strongest sword dancer, I don't know if I will have the chance to spar with you in the future. So, allow me to bring up an old matter. Bring up an old matter? Noah raised his brows. Are you referring to the matter we talked about previously? That's right. Leola nodded. Let me ask you one more time. Do you want to come to the Dragon Duchy of Laguna? Leola's words made Noah's expression turn strange. I am not proposing. Looking at Noah's strange expression, Leola seemed to have recalled something important. She blushed and glared at Noah. Although I can't deny that the Dragon King will let us marry in order to give birth to better offspring, it isn't absolute. There are many outstanding Magus concubines in the Dragon Duchy of Laguna. They definitely won't disappoint you. Many Magus concubines? Won't disappoint me? Noah couldn't help but ask. Why do you sound like a pimp? Pimp? Leola was slightly taken aback, and asked in confusion. What's a pimp? Noah's mouth twitched, and he sighed. No, it's nothing. I feel like you've said something rude. Leola knitted her brows again, but she didn't continue to dwell on it. Be it as a spirit envoy or as a man, in my opinion, you are extremely outstanding. Therefore, I sincerely hope that you can come to our Dragon Duchy of Laguna. If possible, I hope you can give me good news. As Leola spoke, she stared at Noah from the beginning to the end. Her attitude was still the same as before. She was very open and aboveboard, making it hard for Noah to feel disgusted by her. At that moment, Linley finally reacted to the situation. Wait. Wait. Linley couldn't help but take a step forward and yell. What do you mean by a proposal? When these words came out of Lindsay Lay's mouth, the whole place suddenly went silent. The nobles who were conversing in the surroundings stared at her in bewilderment. After a few moments of silence, they burst into an uproar. Proposal? Is there a proposal over there? Someone is proposing to Sword Emissary by Jew of the Black and White Sword Emissaries? Could it be that young lady? Isn't that the Princess of Dragon Duchy of Laguna? The Princess of Dragon Duchy of Laguna proposed to Sword Emissary by Jew? I see. Dragon Duchy of Laguna intends to use a marriage alliance to obtain the only male spirit envoy on the continent who is on par with the strongest sword dancer. That's too cunning. Yeah. I didn't expect there to be such a method. Why don't we give it a try? Perhaps we can poach Sword Emissary by Jew. The entire ballroom instantly became noisy. In this situation, Noah felt as though he had swallowed a fly and couldn't utter a single word. Linley realized that she had messed up and covered her mouth immediately. As for Leola, who had been reduced to being the person who proposed to Noah, her pretty face alternated between green and white. In the end, it was completely replaced by a blush of red. Under the shame and anger, Leola screamed without hesitation. It's not a proposal. I'm only interested in his genes. This sentence echoed clearly in the air. The originally noisy ballroom instantly quieted down. That was because everyone was dumbfounded. Even Linley was stunned. She turned her head stiffly and looked at Noah. Genes? You guys actually have such a relationship? Noah covered his face as if he couldn't bear to look at it. He was completely speechless. Leola seemed to have realized what she had said. With a bang, her pretty face turned red as if it had exploded. In the next second, tears welled up in the corner of Leola's eyes. I'll be back. After saying this, Leola lifted her skirt as if she was running away in tears. In an instant, she disappeared without a trace. Noah subconsciously extended a hand in the direction of Leola, as if he wanted to hold her back. One of his hands was suspended in the air. He didn't know whether to raise it or put it down. In the end, he laughed as if he was torturing himself. Forget it, I didn't really plan to go to the Dragon Duchy of Doragonia to spread my genes anyway. However, it was obvious that others didn't think so. What is going on? Linley looked at Noah with tears in her eyes. Explain it to me clearly. Explain? Would that work? Looking at the strange looks and expressions of the people around him, Noah looked up at the sky and sighed. Chapter 1842. After Linley and Leola's messing around, the atmosphere in the ballroom became a little strange. When Claire, Phaeana, and Alice all dressed up and put on their gorgeous evening gowns, the strange atmosphere finally calmed down a little. However, Noah could clearly feel that the surrounding nobles were looking at him with completely different gazes. Perhaps they were inspired by Leola's marriage proposal, and the nobles from various countries had the idea of using marriage to rope in Noah. If they could rope in an elven envoy that was on par with the strongest sword dancer, it would be a great thing even for a country, let alone a noble. Moreover, Noah was a male elven envoy. He could definitely marry the outstanding witch G and give birth to even more outstanding offspring. Just this alone was enough to attract the nobles. Of course, this was also inspired by Leola's genes are important speech. Thus, Noah could only feel that the surrounding nobles, whether male or female, were looking at him with burning gazes. Those burning gazes made Noah feel goosebumps all over his body. Fortunately, because Claire, Linley, Friana, and Alice were by his side, the nobles didn't directly come up to propose marriage. Otherwise, Noah felt that he would definitely be like in the world of Fairy's Tale, when he solved the giant dragon's invasion and became the first of the 10 Saint Magi. Wouldn't he welcome an even more spectacular marriage proposal? Just like that, time slowly passed by. Not long after, in the depths of the great sacrificial hall, a fire began to appear around an altar that was enshrined with tributes to the Elven King. Under the illumination of the bonfire, 5 elven maidens gradually appeared and began to dance on the altar. It was a solemn and elegant dance, and at the same time, it was also the highest level of the ritual. The 5 fairy concubines, who served the 5 fairy kings of fire, water, wind, earth, and saint respectively, were like goddesses. Their steps were light and graceful as they danced rhythmically. Surprisingly, Laetia was also present. However, compared to the easygoing demeanor she had displayed in front of Noah and the rest, Laetia, who was dancing on the altar, exuded a noble and elegant aura. Her expression was also rather pure. She was like a completely different person. There was not a single person in the hall who was unaffected by the solemn and beautiful dance. All of them focused their gazes on the altar as if they were intoxicated by it. Noah, Claire, Linley, Phaeana, and Alice also gathered together, watching the sacrifice ceremony of the 5 elven concubines. As expected of a real fairy, Phaeana praised. His mastery of the sacred music of rituals is indeed not something I can compare to. Is that so? Claire said. I don't think Phaeana will lose to the fairy maiden when it comes to Kagura. After all, if your highness' contract didn't have any problems, your highness would have succeeded Lady Rubia's position 4 years ago, and not Lady Laetia. Alice said regretfully. Although this is a bit rude to Lady Laetia, your highness didn't become the fairy maiden. It's really regrettable. I don't think it's that regrettable. Phaeana said magnanimously. At least, in these 4 years, I've seen through many people's true colors. Moreover, if I had become the fairy maiden, then we wouldn't have been able to team up like this and win the elven sword dance ritual together. Well, that's true. Linley combed her light golden hair that reached her waist. If it weren't for Phaeana's sacred music of rituals, we wouldn't have been able to win so many times and defeat so many opponents. Moreover, if Phaeana became the fairy maiden, perhaps it wouldn't be a good thing? Claire's voice became low. No matter what, the Elven King is already. The group of girls suddenly fell silent. Looking at the group of young ladies, Noah sighed inwardly and said, Don't worry. Sure enough, you still can't accept the fact that the Elven King has gone mad? The girls still remained silent. Under such circumstances, Noah spoke indifferently. It's all right, it would be strange if you accepted such a big thing so easily. Saying so, Noah turned his gaze to the group of girls. Moreover, you should be nervous about the audience after the sacrificial ceremony, right? Claire, Linley, Phaeana, and Alice were immediately speechless. After the fairy maiden's sacrificial ceremony, Noah's group would be led to the deepest part of the great sacrificial hall, where they would take a bath and change out of their attire. Then, the group would go to the great sacrificial hall and make a wish in front of the Elven King. Looking at the time, it would be less than 3 hours before they would have an audience with the Elven King. In other words, after 3 hours, the group of girls would personally witness the future of the world in the great sacrificial hall. Noah had said that at that time, he would make a move against the Elven Kings. If he succeeded, the Elven Kings would be released, and the world would be temporarily free from the threat. If he failed, the outcome would be eternal damnation. At that time, not only Noah, but perhaps the group of girls would also be implicated and lose their lives on the spot. Of course, with Iselia here, the group of girls would at least be able to survive. On the other hand, the group of young ladies wasn't afraid of death. It was just that when they thought about how the future of the human world and the elf world would be determined by the success of Noah's operation, the nervousness in their hearts couldn't be any greater. It would be a lie to say that I'm not nervous. Alice was the first to break the silence and looked at Noah. "But I don't think what you're doing is wrong, so we'll support you. No matter what, we're teammates." Linley smiled sweetly. "In the academy, we obtained the qualifications to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival together. In the Elven Sword Dance Festival, we won together. If you plan to save the world, then we have no reason to stand by and do nothing. Although we can't be sure if we can help, we're all winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. If we don't meet the Elven King, the divine ceremonial courtyard will definitely be the first to make things difficult for us. They'll think that we're being disrespectful, right?" Viviana said sarcastically. "It's a pity that they still don't know that the person they're serving is no longer normal. If possible, I also hope to be able to witness it to the end." Claire's tone became resolute. "For years ago, when Sister barged into the great sacrificial hall, I want to personally confirm with my own eyes what exactly you saw." After saying that, the group of girls looked at each other, and shortly after, they all looked at Noah and said in unison, "So, we'll go with you." Hearing that, Noah's eyes flickered and he suddenly felt enlightened. Although these teammates of his were all pampered and noble young ladies, they weren't as weak as he had imagined. Because her sister betrayed the Elven King, Claire had been deprived of everything by her side. For 4 years, she had been troubled and looked at differently by others. She had already honed a strong heart. Linley looked like a pampered young lady, but not only was she gentle and virtuous, but she had also experienced the incident of her close relative being frozen by the mad Elven King. She also had a part of her perseverance. Like Claire, Viviana had been neglected by the royal family after being reduced to a lost elven concubine. She was looked at strangely by others, and her body and mind had been tempered. As for Alice, she didn't seem to have anything special about her, but she was also born in a family of warriors. Her respected sister had once been led astray, and it wasn't that she hadn't encountered adversity. Although these girls were incomparably pure in body and mind, it didn't mean that they would escape from suffering. In this regard, Noah could only smile. "Then, let's go together." Claire, Linley, Viviana, and Alice immediately smiled and nodded heavily. At this moment, on the altar, the elven concubine's voice resounded. "The sacrificial ceremony has ended. The winners, please come with us to take a bath and prepare to have an audience with the Elven King." The most crucial moment had finally arrived. Chapter 1843. This was an extremely grand yet somewhat dim hall. Pieces of elven ores hung on the walls of the hall, emitting a faint light. In the deepest part of the hall, there was a door. The door wasn't grand, but it was quite ancient and gave off a feeling of a long history. Duh. Noah stepped into the hall with powerful footsteps. After looking around, Noah's gaze fell on the door in the deepest part of the hall. Next to Noah, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice appeared one after another. Besides, just like Noah, the group of young ladies fixed their gazes on the ancient door almost immediately. Looking at the door that seemed to have been there since ancient times, Claire couldn't help but murmur, "Is that the door to the Hall of True Sacrifice?" At this moment, Noah and the others had changed their evening gowns into the uniforms of the Elven Academy. Meeting the Elven King was a matter of supreme honor. At least, it was definitely so for the people of this world. Originally, under such circumstances, Noah and the others wouldn't be overboard even if they wore extremely expensive and luxurious clothes. However, as the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival, the Elven envoys had to wear the competition's attire when meeting the Elven King. Therefore, Noah and the others were still wearing the Elven Academy's uniforms. The pure white uniforms seemed to reflect light under the illumination of the elven ores in the hall, appearing extremely conspicuous. However, Noah and the others' gazes were fixed on the ancient door and didn't move away. Because that was the door to the Hall of True Sacrifice where the Elven King resided. Just as Noah and the others were staring at the door, a series of orderly footsteps sounded from behind them, entering the ears of Noah and the others. The group immediately came back to their senses and turned their heads to look behind them. They saw 5 elven concubines wearing the highest ceremonial attire neatly lined up and walked in. That was not a phenomenon that had been rehearsed or deliberately produced. As elven concubines who had always practiced the divine music of ceremonies and performed the highest level of dance for the elven king, the uniformity of their steps had long been engraved into the instincts of these girls. They could achieve such formality and pleasing to the eye without any deliberate effort. Naturally, Laetia was also present among the 5 elven maidens. In such a formal occasion, Rexia looked as solemn and holy as she did during the sacrificial ceremony. She exuded a noble and elegant temperament. Immediately after, the 5 fairy maidens bowed to Noah and his group, who were the winners. Then, as if she was the representative, Laetia took a step forward. Laetia's gaze slowly swept over Noah's group. She smiled and said, "Everyone, it's time to meet the Elf King. Have you all decided on your wishes?" Claire, Lindsley, Frianna, and Alice did not answer. Instead, they all focused their gazes on Noah. All of a sudden, the gazes of the elven concubines all gathered on Noah. Being stared at by 5 of the noblest fairy maidens in the continent, even the king of a country would be nervous, right? However, Noah acted as if he did not feel anything and nodded calmly. "We've decided on our wishes." That's right. They had decided on their wishes. From the beginning, Noah and his group only had one wish. Unfortunately, it was a wish that could not be revealed to anyone. Including Laetia. Including the fairy maidens. Claire, Lindsley, Frianna, and Alice's expressions were somewhat tense. The girls were probably worried that Laetia would ask Noah about the contents of his wishes. However, this worry was unnecessary. "Is that so?" Laetia nodded understandingly and then pointed to the door in the deepest part of the hall. "Then, everyone, please go through that door." Noah and his group once again turned their gazes to the door in the deepest part of the hall. Behind that door is a special place that is separated from the normal space. The front part is a corridor that extends endlessly. Through that corridor, you will reach the Hall of True Sacrifice and meet the Elf King. Laetia explained. Along the way, there will be forks in the corridor, but please do not step into them. In the past, several winners of the Fairy Sword Dance Festival stepped into the forks and lost their way. In the end, they disappeared in the cracks of the dimension and never appeared again. Everyone, please be careful. The expressions of the group of girls became even more tense. They probably did not expect that just an audience would be life-threatening. Only Noah slightly narrowed his eyes and nodded coldly. "We understand." "That's good." Laetia seemed to feel relieved from the bottom of her heart. She smiled again and then bowed to Noah and his group. "Then, congratulations on getting your wish." Behind Laetia, the other 4 fairy concubines also bent down and bowed. Only then did Noah cast his gaze towards the group of girls and smiled slightly. "All right, let's go." Claire, Linley, Frianna, and Alice all nodded in agreement. At the next moment, under Noah's lead, the group of people walked toward the door in the deepest part of the hall with clear footsteps that echoed in the surroundings. Kacha, almost at the same time, the ancient door in the deepest part of the hall suddenly made a strange sound. Then, it gradually opened. The scene that appeared in front of Noah and his group was the same as what Laetia had described. It was a corridor that extended endlessly. There were indeed forks in the corridor. There were no walls around him. Instead, he was surrounded by a colorful space that was constantly twisting. At first glance, it looked like a corridor that was suspended in the colorful sky. It was quite beautiful. However, behind this magnificence, there was a hidden danger to life. If it was only Claire, Linley, Frianna, and Alice, the 4 of them would definitely be nervous facing this corridor, right? However, Noah continued to walk in front as though he was not lost at all. His footsteps did not stop at all, and he continued to walk in the direction of the corridor. The back of the figure standing in front of the girls made them feel an uncontrollable courage. They all made up their minds and followed behind Noah. Thus, under the witness of the 5 fairy maidens, Noah and his group stepped into the infinite corridor. Rumble. With a rumble, the ancient door suddenly closed. The entire hall once again returned to an indescribable silence. In the infinite corridor that seemed to have no end, Noah and his group did not know how long they had walked. Although there were forks in the road, and some of them even appeared suddenly under the gaze of Noah and his group never deviated from the direction and kept moving forward. In such a different space, even the sound of footsteps was not allowed, so Noah and his group walked in silence. Along the way, no one spoke. Instead, with a determined expression, under Noah's lead, they kept moving forward. At a certain moment, Noah stopped. At the same time, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice all stopped as well. This was because a huge door had suddenly appeared in front of everyone. It was as if a huge door had suddenly appeared and stood there. Gotcha! At the same time, the heavy door opened by itself, and the scene behind the door was imprinted into the eyes of the group. What appeared there was a huge staircase. The staircase extended upward, as if reaching into the sky, and connected to a high platform. On the high platform, there were 5 jade thrones. On the thrones, balls of shining light seemed to be suspended there, emitting a dazzling strong light. Looking at the balls of light sitting on the jade thrones, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice held their breaths. Noah's eyes also flickered, and as if talking to himself, he whispered, "Is that the Fairy King?" Yes. That was the Fairy King. He governed the elements of the world. He stood at the top of the world. He controlled the hegemony of the world. Like a god, he was revered by all the lives in the human world and the elemental world. Chapter 1844. Clank. Dazzling light shone from the balls of light hovering above the jade thrones, illuminating the entire hall of true sacrifice. That light was like the most dazzling color in the world, reverberating non-stop. How many people would believe such a dazzling light? In that dazzling light, there was endless darkness and endless madness hidden within. In the next second, a grand and solemn voice resounded in the entire hall of true sacrifice. "Your sword dance is truly spectacular. We can grant your wish through a miracle to repay your sword dance. What request do you have for us?" That voice seemed to be able to shake the space. The voice carried unparalleled godly might and reverberated in the huge hall of true sacrifice. The moment this voice sounded, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice all trembled. It was as if an instinct from the deepest part of their bodies was glowing, making the girls all want to kneel down. In the past, the winners of the Elven Sword Dance Festival had to immediately kneel and declare their wish to the Elven King. Then, that wish would be fulfilled under the execution of miracle system. However, just as Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice were about to kneel, Noah lifted his foot and walked forward without any reason. Noah. Noah. The girls' hearts all trembled. Because Noah didn't kneel and walked forward as if ignoring the Elven King's voice, it was an absolute blasphemy. And the Elven King seemed to think so too. The entire space of the Hall of Sacrifice suddenly trembled. An extremely terrifying pressure filled the air, spreading in all directions. Among the balls of light hovering above the jade thrones, there were 3 balls of light that emitted a shocking godly might. That shocking pressure and divine might made the hearts of the 4 girls, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice, shrink. Their charming faces turned deathly pale in an instant. Only Noah didn't seem to feel anything. His dark and deep eyes stared at the balls of light on the jade thrones, and fixed his gaze on the 3 balls of light that emitted a shocking pressure. Lotus said that the Holy Elven King's seat was empty. And the Water Elven King was already liberated. There were only 3 Elven Kings left. Then, it was clear which jade thrones the 3 Elven Kings were on. Looking at the source of the pressure, it was clear. Thus, a burst of violent godly might energy burst out from Noah's body like a burning flame. On the back of Noah's hand, the elven seal emitted an unprecedentedly dazzling light, illuminating the entire space. Then, Noah began to chant. "Cold Steel Queen, demon-slaying holy sword, turn into a sword of steel and bestow me with godly power." It was the incantation to summon the demon slayer. Divine starlight, lightning of salvation, wisdom of the goddess, indestructible steel, sword, appear in my hand. That was the incantation to summon the heavenly sword of salvation. Under the solemn and sacred incantation, a silver flash and a strong platinum light burst out from the elven seal on the back of Noah's hand, turning into a shiny silver holy sword and a dazzling platinum divine sword. Noah held them tightly in his hand. Shocking godly might energy poured into the holy sword and divine sword, making the silver light and platinum light look like two small suns, emitting extremely dazzling light. It was also at this moment that the pressure permeating the space suddenly stagnated. Bang! On the jade thrones, among the three balls of light emitting a shocking pressure, a burst of muffled explosions that made the space tremble. Then, a strange phenomenon occurred. An incomparably terrifying flame. A hair-raising hurricane. An extremely violent impact. They surged out from the three light clusters that sat on the jade throne. In an instant, they shook the entire space and swept out. Then, an extremely orderly voice rang out from the space. Die. As soon as the voice fell, terrifying flames, hair-raising hurricanes, an extremely violent impact surged down from the three jade thrones. Wherever the flames passed, the atmosphere was evaporated. Wherever the hurricanes passed, an ear-piercing sound echoed. Wherever the impact passed, the stairs trembled. The highest level of power of the three attributes of fire, wind, and earth turned into a torturous torment that took away a person's life. Like a monstrous wave of flames, hurricanes, and impact, it surged down from above. That power was definitely not something that a human could resist. Once touched, just like the heartless voice that echoed in the space a second ago, there was only one outcome. Death. Unfortunately, when faced with the shocking waves of fire, wind, and impact that were like monstrous waves, Noah's footsteps continued to move forward without stopping for a single moment. Only a voice slowly sounded from Noah's body. Avesta, activate. Dazzling starlight gradually emerged from Noah's body. At this moment, in the depths of Noah's heart, the cosmic sea, which no longer had the stone plate that represented authority and sovereignty, began to riot. Counteracted in turn. Simulated star map, another cosmology. The emerging starlight turned into an extremely terrifying power and shook Noah's body. Avesta. It could imitate the enemy's cosmology. Except for the human's cosmology, the power of other existences could be imitated and integrated into one's own simulated star map, another cosmology. This simulated star map, another cosmology, which could not be used in the world of fairy's tale, was now finally used by Noah. At this moment, under the power of the simulated star map, another cosmology, the power of the three elf kings of fire, wind, and earth all turned into waves of fluctuations and poured into Noah's body. Noah's aura suddenly rose steadily and climbed to the top, easily surpassing the elf kings. If it was said that the elven king was like a god, and his level in the box could be listed in the 4 digits, then with the power of the 3 elven kings, Noah's power had risen to an extremely terrifying level. Faintly, it had already reached the 3 digits, and the trend of breaking through the 4 digits. The astonishing power fluctuations caused the raging flames, wind, and impact from the jade throne to stagnate, as if they were stirred up by an invisible big hand. Bang! In the muffled sound of an explosion, Noah fiercely stomped on the ground, creating a shock wave. Under the situation where the ground was crushed, he turned into a streak of light and violently rushed up. In the next instant, the streak of light violently collided with the raging flames, wind, and impact waves. Poochie! Accompanied by the sound of tearing silk, the streak of light that soared into the sky was like a sharp knife, fiercely tearing apart the terrifying raging flames, the hair-raising wind, and the extremely violent impact waves formed by the 3 huge waves. Noah, who had turned into a streak of light, faced the raging flames, wind, and impact waves head-on. Finally, he broke through the 3 terrifying forces and violently shot to the front of the high platform. Absolute sword skill. Form breaker ardent flower spiral sword dance 72 consecutive strikes. That was the highest number of consecutive strikes that Noah could display at the moment. Wang. The Demon Slayer and Heavenly Sword elven magic equipment glowed brightly like never before. The silver Holy Sword and the platinum Heavenly Sword turned into a torrential storm of slashes. Like a continuous sword formation formed by streaks of sword light, it instantly enveloped the three balls of light that were emitting a terrifying aura. Poochie poochie poochie. The slashes that turned into sword light swept past the balls of light one by one, and in the midst of the tearing sound, the balls of light were slashed apart one by one. Bang! Suddenly, the balls of light exploded one after another. Chapter 1845. Bang! In an extremely uniform muffled explosion, the light balls sitting on the jade throne all exploded like fireworks, turning into bursts of light particles and dissipating in the air. Under the combo storm of Demon Slayer and Heavenly Sword of Salvation, even the Elf Kings were cut open alive. As the light balls exploded one by one, they disappeared one after another. Noah could clearly feel that his combo all hit the target, and each hit the Elf Kings hidden under the light balls. In other words, Noah had successfully liberated the remaining Fire Elf Kings, Wind Elf Kings, and Earth Elf Kings. Almost at the same time, the powerful force surging in Noah's body began to dissipate little by little. The power from the three Elf Kings all dissipated one by one because the target of their imitation disappeared. The starlight surging on the surface of Noah's body dimmed little by little. In the depths of Noah's heart, the cosmic sea that represented another cosmology also calmed down little by little, restoring its original vastness and tranquility. This phenomenon told Noah the Elf Kings were indeed all liberated. At that moment, Noah tapped the ground with the tip of his foot and retreated rapidly like a phantom. In an instant, he swept down the long flight of stairs and returned to the side of the group of girls. Only then did Claire, Linsley, Fayanna, and Alice react. Success, success. Linsley couldn't help but cheer. The Elf Kings are all liberated. Claire, Linsley, and Alice also looked surprised and couldn't help but run toward Noah. Although it was extremely unbelievable that Noah actually defeated the joint attack of the three Elf Kings in an instant, at this moment, the joy of the result temporarily overshadowed the shock, causing the girls to cheer. However, Noah felt that something was wrong. Thus, Noah yelled at the group of girls without even turning his head. "Don't come over." Claire, Linsley, Fayanna, and Alice suddenly stopped in their tracks, and the joy on their faces also froze. Noah raised his eyes and stared at the 5 empty jade thrones above. His dark and deep eyes gradually condensed. An indescribable heavy atmosphere began to spread in the air. The entire space returned to a state of silence, giving people an extremely oppressive feeling. Then, in Noah's heart, Aster and Athena's voices sounded at the same time. "Master, be careful. Something is coming." The moment Aster and Athena's voices sounded, Noah's pupils also suddenly shrank. The next moment, the jade thrones in the deepest part of the Hall of Sacrifice suddenly trembled. Accompanied by trembling sounds that sounded like mournful wails, existences that did not belong to this world surged out from the jade thrones. Seeing this scene, Noah's eyes condensed again. Claire, Linsley, Fayanna, and Alice looked at the things gushing out from the jade thrones. They all trembled, and their expressions changed drastically. What gushed out from the jade thrones was dense darkness. It didn't refer to the pure darkness, but it was like a turbid current that could engulf people. It emitted an ominous, evil, decaying, and terrifying aura. The darkness was like pitch-black magma, turning into turbid currents that continuously gushed out from the jade thrones, forming a wave that flowed down the stairs. That scene was like a pitch-black mudslide rushing down, making one's hair stand on end. Feeling the ominous, evil, decaying, terrifying, and even curse-like aura contained in the dark turbid current, Claire, Linsley, Fayanna, and Alice's pretty faces turned pale, and their bodies uncontrollably retreated. What is that?" Fayanna couldn't help but let out a sorrowful cry. What a terrifying feeling." Linsley's voice also changed. "Is that the otherworldly darkness?" Alice clenched her trembling teeth. Sister. Sister, did you see something like this back then? Claire's whole body trembled. Even Noah couldn't help but click his tongue when he saw the dense darkness gushing out from the jade thrones like black mud. It's like the evils of this world. Noah had seen the same scene a long time ago. In the world of the Type Moon, during the Holy Grail War, all the evils of this world gushed out from the contaminated Holy Grail. It was exactly the same as the scene in front of him. However, all the evils of this world were just pure curses. If one was swallowed up, as long as one was a human, there was only one outcome. Death. However, the otherworldly darkness in front of him wouldn't curse people to death. Instead, it would cause elves to go crazy. Even the Elven King couldn't avoid it. He bitterly resisted, but in the end, he was swallowed up and completely lost to madness. However, unfortunately, this kind of power is useless against me. The otherworldly darkness was undoubtedly a kind of power. Since that was the case, that thing was destined to be useless against Noah. Without mentioning anything else, with Avesta's another cosmology, as long as Noah imitated the cosmology of the otherworldly darkness and used it as a mirror, he would be able to counteract that power. Since Noah didn't do anything and rushed into the otherworldly darkness, nothing would happen. Because Noah's physique was immune to all negative powers. The otherworldly darkness happened to be among them. At that moment, Noah raised his head and stared at the jade throne surging with dense darkness. Is that the door? The otherworldly darkness came from neither the human world nor the elemental elves' world. In that case, to come to the elemental elves' world from the otherworldly darkness, there must be a door that can be passed through. Just like how coming to the elemental elves' world from the human world required a door, the darkness from the otherworldly darkness also required a door. Now it seemed that the door of the otherworldly darkness was opened by those jade thrones, swallowing the Elven King and making him go crazy. If the door was always open, even if the Elven Kings were liberated, they would still be swallowed by the otherworldly darkness in the future and fall into a state of madness, thus destroying the human world and the elven world. It was precisely because of this that Lubia was desperate and went to extremes, hoping to eliminate the Elven Kings from the root and eliminate the threat to the world. Frankly speaking, Noah also felt that it was not enough to just liberate the Elven Kings. If the otherworldly darkness was not eliminated from the root, it would still be a threat to the world. However, it was also impossible to eliminate the otherworldly darkness. Because no one knew how much darkness from the otherworldly darkness was left, and there was no guarantee that it would not continue to multiply and endlessly threaten the human world and the elemental elves' world. More importantly, there was no way to eliminate the darkness. After all, it was just pure power. So, Noah finally thought of a way. Back in the abandoned city, Noah told Lotus the method. Just destroy the door. With the power of the Demon Slayer and Heavenly Sword, it was not impossible to destroy the door that connected the two worlds. So, Noah's feet moved, and his body turned into an arrow that left the bowstring, shaking a whirlwind, like a gale, and rushed in the direction of the jade thrones. A faint sound of breaking air was heard. Noah's body flew in the direction of the jade thrones like a ghost. The dense darkness that surged out from the jade seat suddenly seemed to have been stimulated, and it began to fluctuate like boiling waves. Below, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice, who saw Noah rush out with their own eyes, suddenly cried out in alarm. Be careful. They saw that the dark turbid flow turned into waves and surged up, rushing in the direction of Noah's back and covering the direction of Noah. Chapter 1846. Glug glug glug. The thick darkness that surged out from the jade seats on the high platform was like boiling water, making strange noises. Under such circumstances, the pitch-black turbid flow that flowed down the stairs also surged violently, making people's hearts palpitate. Noah, who was rushing in the direction of the jade seats, discovered the threat behind him before the group of girls cried out in alarm. The turbid flow that was like black magma turned into a boiling wave. Like a giant hand, it covered the direction of Noah, who was flying at high speed. In the next second, it was imprinted into Noah's eyes. An ominous, evil, decaying, and terrifying aura constantly emerged from the thick darkness. The intensity of the aura was so strong that even Claire, Linley, Phaeana, and Alice could clearly feel it, not to mention Noah, who had superb senses. However, with a constitution that was not affected by any negative energy, Noah did not need to fear the thick darkness. However, if he was swallowed by the thick darkness, then even if Noah was not affected in any way, his movements would be obstructed and he would not be able to rush to the jade seats. Therefore, Noah could not ignore the threat behind him. Immediately, Noah poured divine power into the holy sword and divine blade in his hands. Absolute sword skill. Form 3 Shadow Moon Dance. In an instant, the silver holy sword and platinum divine blade turned into an arc, like moonlight, flashing through space. Poochie. With a ripping sound, the thick darkness that surged in Noah's direction like a huge wave was directly cut apart by the demon slayer and heavenly sword. Like a black ocean that was forcefully cut apart, it was cut in half at the waist. However, the thick darkness that was cut in half did not follow the gravity and smash into the pitch-black magma sea below. Instead, it directly floated there, trembling once again. With a twist, it turned into waves of pitch-black turbid flow. The turbid flow was like a huge shadow, mixed with ominous and evil fluctuations. It was like a black net that enveloped Noah's direction. Immediately, Noah's location was covered by a shadow. The thick darkness also fell from the sky, one by one fiercely covering Noah below. Absolute sword skill. Form 3 Shadow Moon Dance. Noah used the same trick again. His whole body that was suspended in the air started to spin like a top. The demon slayer and heavenly sword turned into sharp sword light, violently slashing apart. Poochie poochie poochie. The thick darkness that fell from the sky like a black net was suddenly ruthlessly cut apart by the moonlight like slashes, exploding like water splashes. However, the thick darkness was still not destroyed. This time, the splash-like darkness squirmed and turned into black lumps, shooting towards Noah like bullets. Noah, who had just cut apart the thick darkness, had no way to dodge. Bang 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 bang. Amidst a series of muffled sounds, Noah was sent flying backward as if he had been hit by a heavy rock. The friction between him and the air caused a sharp piercing sound to resound. Noah. Claire, Linsley, Phaeana, and Alice all cried out in alarm. No. We can't watch anymore. Linsley bit her lip and shouted loudly. We have to help him. That's right. Alice agreed with Linsley without hesitation. Noah is fighting for the world, for everyone. We can't just watch from the side. But what can we do? Phaeana said anxiously and helplessly. We're not as powerful as Noah. Even if we help, we can't help. Even if that's the case, we can only go. Claire summoned her flame whip, her red eyes staring fixedly at the thick darkness. Noah is fighting. Even my sister wants to fight the otherworld darkness. I can't just watch. Linsley and Alice both nodded repeatedly. Phaeana clenched her teeth and nodded immediately. Okay. I'll give you my blessing. Claire, Linsley, and Alice looked at each other and smiled. They all took out their elven equipment. However, just as the group of young ladies was about to rush forward, Noah's voice sounded again. Don't come over. Noah hovered in the air. He stared at the dense darkness that was still surging down from the jade throne and spoke in a deep voice. That darkness can make the elven king go crazy, so it can make other elves go crazy. If you rashly barge in, you'll make all your contracted elves go crazy. Then it'll be terrible. In fact, if it wasn't for the continuous infusion of divine power into the demon slayer and the heavenly sword, as well as the fact that Aster and Athena's strength were equally extraordinary, Noah's contracted elves would have gone crazy after coming into contact with the darkness several times. Even so, Aster and Athena exhausted all their strength to resist the erosion of the otherworld darkness. They didn't even have time to say a word. And this was under the condition that Noah had been continuously providing divine power support. If Noah stopped the infusion of divine power, perhaps Aster and Athena wouldn't be able to resist the erosion of the otherworld darkness. Even Aster and Athena, who could rival the Elven King, were in such a state, let alone the contracted elves of Claire, Lindsley, Phaeana, and Alice. Although the contracted elves of the girls were all high-ranked elves, they were still a distance away from the highest-ranked elves. Their strength hadn't even reached the demonic level and was far from the demon god level, let alone the mythical level. Aster and Athena's strength was above the mythical level, but they were still having a hard time resisting. Once elves who weren't even at the demonic level came into contact with the darkness, they would definitely go crazy. Therefore, Noah couldn't let the girls get involved. You don't have to interfere. It's not like I don't have a way. Noah said to the group of girls without turning his head as he stared at the thick darkness that was surging towards him. You just have to protect yourselves. If anything happens, immediately turn around and run. Do you understand? Claire, Lindsley, Phaeana, and Alice's high spirits suddenly disappeared as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over them. However, Noah's words were reasonable and couldn't be refuted. At that moment, the girls could only grit their teeth and stand on the spot, their faces filled with unwillingness. Hovering in the air, Noah took a deep breath as he looked at the endless surge of otherworld darkness that was about to flow out of the stairs and touch the hall where the girls were. Aster. Athena. Let's decide the victor in one breath. Aster and Athena didn't say anything. However, the demon slayer and heavenly sword in Noah's hands blossomed with dazzling radiance, illuminating the entire hall of sacrifice. Feeling the divine power flowing from the demon slayer and heavenly sword, Noah's lips curled up. Immediately, Noah's figure shot up like a meteor, rushing toward the jade seats on the high platform. Wang! The dense darkness, which was like black lava, immediately began to rage. Just like before, it surged and set off waves after waves of black waves that surged towards Noah, who was flying over in an imposing manner. Looking at the thick darkness surging toward him like a monstrous wave, Noah didn't reduce his speed, but instead flew higher and higher. Avesta, activate. Counteracted in turn. Simulating another cosmology. Dazzling starlight burst out from Noah's body, mixed with silver and platinum flashes, shining brightly. Chapter 1847. Clang. Deep and dazzling starlight suddenly flashed in the space of the hall of sacrifice. For a moment, it dyed the incomparably thick darkness into a dazzling starlight. Noah's whole body seemed to be surrounded by stars, and his whole body was shrouded in a dazzling light like the Milky Way. That radiance even overshadowed the radiance of the demon slayer and the heavenly sword. Carrying the starlight all over his body, Noah was like a bolt of lightning. He did not dodge or evade. Instead, he directly charged toward the dense tide of darkness that was surging toward him. Wang! When Noah, who soared into the sky like a meteor, rushed straight into the thick darkness that surged over, the sea of darkness that flowed down the stairs like pitch-black magma suddenly trembled. Immediately, Claire, Linley, Phaeana, and Alice all saw it. Following Noah's rush, the thick darkness that forced Noah to retreat suddenly seemed to disappear and completely dissipated. Wang 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 wang. In the trembling sound, the thick darkness that came into contact with Noah's starlight was dispelled one by one. At this moment, the another cosmology called Avesta didn't superimpose the thick darkness power on Noah's body. Instead, it turned into a mirror and completely cancelled out the otherworldly darkness that came into contact with Noah. Under the power of the another cosmology of Avesta, Noah seemed to have entered a no-man's land. He rushed all the way and forcibly separated the surging waves of darkness. Chi! In the clear sound of breaking through the air, Noah, who was surrounded by dense starlight, rushed up and finally broke through the obstruction of the otherworldly darkness. He scuttled in front of the jade thrones. Wang 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 wang. The thick darkness that surged out from the jade throne seemed to have anticipated something and crazily trembled. Clang! In the next second, a dazzling light expanded from the demon slayer and heavenly sword. Noah poured all the divine power he could control into the demon slayer and heavenly sword. His whole body swelled with phosphorescent light. Absolute sword skill. Form breaker ardent flower spiral sword dance 72 consecutive slashes. The silver holy sword and platinum divine sword once again turned into flashes of light and intertwined to form a storm of sword strikes. It enveloped the jade thrones like a storm. The 72 consecutive slashes that were performed by the highest level elven magic device in 1,000th of a second turned into the most violent slashes and heavily fell on the jade thrones. The thick darkness that surged out from the jade thrones suddenly stopped. Bang! A jade throne, jade throne, jade throne. Peng, peng, peng. As if triggering a chain reaction, the remaining 4 jade thrones exploded one after another. Buzz, 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 buzz. The thick darkness that had just stopped suddenly seemed to have completely fallen into a frenzy and trembled violently. Ah! Claire, Linley, Frianna, and Alice cried out in surprise again. This was because the violent thick darkness surged into the air and turned into an extremely huge black arm. It set off a violent gust of wind. With an ominous, evil, decaying, and terrifying aura, it opened its palm in Noah's direction and fiercely grabbed him. Whoosh! The huge black arm even stirred up the turbulence in the atmosphere and turned the gust of wind into a storm. The space around the arm was crazily swirling. The momentum was extremely great. If he was hit by that attack, even if it was Noah, if he didn't activate another cosmology, he wouldn't have a good ending. However, at this moment, Noah didn't seem to notice the huge black arm behind him at all. He stared straight ahead. At this moment, Noah saw it. On the jade thrones where the elf kings originally sat, a vortex like a black hole was slowly rotating, emitting a terrifying aura. The thick darkness from the alien world all surged out from this black hole-like vortex. In other words, the black hole in front of him was the door that connected the alien world and the elemental elf world. Therefore, without any hesitation, Noah suddenly raised the heavenly sword of salvation and gathered a huge amount of divine power under his feet. Ultimate sword skill. Initial form purple lightning. The divine power gathered under Noah's feet was released and turned into a powerful thrust. It made Noah's body rush out like a gust of wind. The lightning-like thrust directly cut through the space, leaving a faint trace in the air. Immediately, the heavenly sword of salvation, which was shining with a dazzling platinum light, was like a thunderbolt, ruthlessly piercing into the black hole-like vortex. Poochie! A tearing sound, as if it had pierced through a human body, resounded. Wang! The thick darkness that surged out from the black hole-like vortex suddenly trembled. Disappear for me! Noah shouted in a low voice. Light of salvation. Full release. The platinum sword that pierced into the black hole-like vortex suddenly bloomed with a brilliant light. The light was like a tide, surging out and covering the black hole-like vortex, covering Noah's body, and at the same time, also covering the huge black hand that suddenly stretched out from behind Noah. In the end, the platinum light even covered the entire Hall of Sacrifice, bathing the Hall of Sacrifice in the light of the sword. The group of girls let out sorrowful cries one after another, and then they were also covered by the platinum light. The Hall of Sacrifice was located in the crevice of the dimension. It was a different space between the human world and the elemental world. If someone was in this different space, they would definitely discover it. In the Hall of Sacrifice, which was suspended in the air, flashes of light began to leak out. Immediately, under the power of the flashes, the Hall of Sacrifice began to collapse, disintegrate, and collapse. Pieces of debris and rubble fell to the ground due to gravity. Until they disappeared in the crevice of the dimension, completely disappearing. Not far from the floating island of the Holy Region, an airship was drifting aimlessly, slowly moving along with the wind. Above the airship, a magic square suddenly flashed without any warning, like a door that was forcefully opened. Ah 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 ah. In the screams, Noah, Claire, Linsley, Viviana, and Alice all appeared from the magic square and fell down. Because they were not very high from the airship, even Noah didn't have time to react, and they all fell onto the deck of the airship. Ah! Ouch! It hurts. The group of girls smashed their butts on the wooden deck, and it was so painful that they almost burst into tears. Only Noah adjusted his body in time and landed on the deck in a crouching position. Right at this moment, a rather cold voice sounded. It seems that the inspiration I received was correct. Hearing this voice, Noah and the others raised their heads subconsciously and looked forward. There, two people seemed to have been standing there since the beginning, and they were imprinted in everyone's eyes. Seeing these two people, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, Alice, and the other girls all opened their eyes wide. Lady Leanna Subble? Linsley and Alice exclaimed in surprise. However, Claire and Fayanna were even more shocked. Looking at the other girl with long red hair, Viviana said in a trembling voice. Lady Rubia. Claire's expression changed drastically, and she murmured in a daze. Sister. Chapter 1848. The people who appeared in front of them were Lotus and Rubia. You. Noah said in surprise. Why are you here? Although there were many questions, this was the most important one. This was because Noah, Claire, Linley, Fayanna, and Alice had no idea why they were suddenly teleported out of the Hall of Sacrifice, let alone the others. Judging from Rubia's words, this elf of calamity seemed to have been here all along, waiting for Noah and the others to appear. How did Rubia know that Noah and the others would appear here? It was as if she knew beforehand that Noah and the others would be teleported here. In fact, Rubia did know beforehand that Noah and the others would be teleported here. Although it's a bit ironic for me to say this, I'm still an elf who once served the Elf King, Rubia said calmly. After you entered the Hall of Sacrifice, I received some inspiration and knew that a door to the Hall of Sacrifice would open in this place, so I waited here. I was also found by Rubia after that, Lotus replied. Because she detected that a door to the Hall of Sacrifice was about to open, Rubia was worried that the otherworld darkness would flow out from there. In order to increase her combat power, Rubia took the initiative to find me. Not only Lotus, Rubia also found Lily and Mauya. The two girls seemed to be on this airship as well. However, Lily was controlling the airship, and Mauya seemed to have developed some fear of Noah ever since she was defeated by Noah in the Elven Sword Dance. She hid in the cabin, unwilling to come out. As for Sarah, the witch who attacked Lotus, she naturally couldn't stay here any longer. She had already fled back to the Alpha Empire. Therefore, there were only 4 people on this airship: Lotus, Rubia, Mauya, and Lily. But Noah frowned slightly. Why were we suddenly teleported here? As soon as this voice fell, a young and clear voice followed. Because the Hall of Sacrifice collapsed at the last moment. If you continue to stay there, you would definitely fall into the crack of the dimension. That's why I opened the door and teleported all of you out. As this voice rang out, a petite figure slowly appeared in everyone's field of vision. Looking at the petite girl, Claire, Linley, Fianna, and Alice all knelt down. Even Lotus half knelt down. Lady Isalia. It was the Water Elf Queen, Isalia Shiva. It's really very lucky to be able to make it in time. Isalia first glanced at Lubia, who was staring at her, then she turned her head and looked at Noah. Noah Doria, thank you for freeing all the Elf Kings and destroying the door of the other world, preventing the Elf Kings from being devoured again. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that you've saved us, the human world, and the elf world. Hearing this, Lubia took a step forward. She didn't have the slightest respect for the Elf King and directly said. In other words, the Elf Kings have all been successfully freed, and even the door of the other world has been destroyed? That's right. Isalia nodded heavily. Although the Hall of Sacrifice was also destroyed, it couldn't be better to be able to solve the problem under such circumstances. Hearing this, the girls couldn't help but be overjoyed. Even Lotus showed a trace of joy. Only Lubia said with a cold attitude. Even if the door connecting the other world to the Hall of Sacrifice has been destroyed, there's no guarantee that there won't be a second door between the human world and the elf world, or even a third door. This way, it's only a temporary solution to the problem. No, you're wrong. Noah shook his head and said so. Even if there are still doors between the human world and the elf world, it's only a slight threat at best. It won't cause a world-class crisis, right? After all, the elf kings have been completely freed, and the door that directly leads to our location has been destroyed. Even if there are still doors in other places, if they can't reach us, then they won't be able to corrode our personality. Iselia added. Back then, the otherworld's door opened in the Hall of Sacrifice without our elf king noticing, and it appeared right under our jade throne. The darkness that came from the otherworld directly swallowed us, who were defenseless, and polluted our minds. This time, I'll rebuild the Hall of Sacrifice and cut off the connection between the Hall of Sacrifice and other dimensions, completely eliminating the appearance of doors. Iselia said solemnly. This way, without the Elf King's permission, there won't be any entrance to the Hall of Sacrifice. In other words, the darkness of the other world could no longer threaten the Elf King. And as long as nothing happened to the Elf King, even if the darkness of the other world appeared again, it wouldn't be able to threaten the human world and the elf world. The elf kings who were on guard would never let the darkness of the other world take advantage of them again. This was what Iselia wanted to express. Unfortunately, only the elf king and the world will be saved. As long as the door to the other world still exists, the elves and humans may still be threatened. Rubia said coldly. My campaign is still not over. After leaving this sentence, Rubia turned around and walked towards the cabin without paying attention to the situation here. Sister. Claire couldn't help but call out softly. Rubia's footsteps paused without leaving a trace. Then, as if she didn't hear anything, she continued to walk forward. Looking at Rubia's back, Claire opened her mouth slightly, but in the end, she lowered her head and fell into silence. However, at this time, Fianna held Claire's hand. Let's go after her. Fianna smiled sweetly. I also have a lot of things that I want to ask Lady Rubia. After all, just like how Fianna and Lacia had a good relationship before Rubia's betrayal, Fianna also had a good relationship with Rubia. Presumably, this disappointed elf concubine had a lot to say to Rubia, right? Hearing Fianna's words, Claire plucked up her courage and nodded heavily. Then, Claire and Fianna both chased after Rubia and jogged over. Seeing this scene, everyone tacitly chose to stay where they were. At this time, Linley also plucked up her courage, stepped forward, and asked Iselia. Iselia, Sama, about my sister, don't worry, I didn't forget about this matter. Iselia looked at Linley. Now that the threat of the darkness of the other world no longer exists, we elf kings are also liberated. Once I return to my original body, I will naturally remove the curse I seal on your sister. I believe that soon, you should be able to see your sister again. Linley's pretty face was suddenly filled with surprise, and her eyes even turned slightly red. In response, Noah just smiled and patted Linley's shoulder. See? Didn't your wish come true? Linley nodded repeatedly, then turned around and hugged Noah. Noah was stunned. Alice's pretty face blushed. Linley just hugged Noah tightly and whispered. Thank you. Noah only reacted when he heard this sentence clearly. He couldn't help but laugh. He reached out and hugged Silei. Linley's pretty face also blushed. However, this rich young lady didn't leave Noah's side. Instead, she still hugged Noah tightly, as if she wanted to vent her inner feelings, and didn't let go for a long time. On the side, although Alice's face was red, she didn't yell like before. She probably understood Linley's current feelings. As for Lotus and Iselia, they merely watched this scene with protective gazes, and they couldn't help but smile. Under such a warm atmosphere, the airship floating in the air began to move, and slowly sailed into the distance. The night began to fade. Dawn gradually arrived. On the other side of the sky, the sun gradually rose from the direction of the airship. It was like the light of the future. Chapter 1849. On the deck that was gradually illuminated by the sunlight, Noah slowly walked out of the cabin and came to the bow of the ship. Who? A cold wind blew over, fluttering Noah's robe. Facing the cold wind, Noah stood at the bow of the airship and looked at the boundless sky. His dark and deep eyes flickered slightly. At this moment, footsteps sounded from behind Noah. Noah didn't turn around, as if he knew who it was. He continued to look into the distance. Under such circumstances, Lotus, who was wearing a witch costume, came to Noah's side and also looked into the distance. The man and woman standing side by side didn't speak immediately, as if they were enjoying the peace and quiet, they just looked into the distance. However, whether it was Noah or Lotus, they weren't looking at the scenery, but at the path they had to take next. After an unknown amount of time, Lotus spoke softly. Just now, Lady Isalia entrusted me with a task. Hearing this, Noah wasn't surprised at all and directly said, I can roughly guess what it is. After all, it's not something difficult to guess. Lotus pursed her lips. Lady Isalia wants me to search for the lost elf kings. Now, the elf kings were all liberated from the Hall of Sacrifice and regained their freedom. However, no one knew the whereabouts of the elf kings. At first, when Isalia was liberated by Lotus, the Water Elf King directly reincarnated in the underground maze of the abandoned city and lost her memory and power. Since that was the case, the three elven kings of fire, wind, and earth that were released by Noah should be the same as Isalia. At the cost of having their memories and powers sealed, they should have reincarnated into a corner of the human world and the elven world. Lady Isalia thinks that the most important thing is to find the three elf kings that were liberated. Lotus said. Otherwise, without the jurisdiction of the elf kings, whether it is the human world or the elf world, it may be affected. Even the elements may be completely chaotic, causing the death of many elves. The elements of the world were originally under the jurisdiction of the elf kings. Under the situation of losing so many elf kings, the elements flowing in the human world and the elf world may be out of control. This was not an alarmist thing. Moreover, with Lady Isalia's power, it is also troublesome to protect the human beings. Lotus continued. Therefore, it is absolutely necessary to find the elf kings. I know. Noah shrugged. Moreover, I know that with your character, I guess you've accepted it, right? There's no reason to refuse. Lotus's eyes slightly flickered. Although the power of the Dark Elf King resides in my body, I am not the Dark Elf King. I don't want to start a war with the 5 elf kings. Using this opportunity, I can also reach a compromise with the 5 elf kings. It sounds like something you would do. Noah smiled. However, you're right. Since you can completely control the power of the Dark Elf King, as long as you can build a good relationship with the 5 elven kings and convince them that you're no longer a threat, it's not impossible to reach a compromise. Because of this, I will continue to act together with Lubia, Mauya, and Lily in the human world and the elf world to find the whereabouts of the elf kings. Lotus said. Lubia has also agreed and said that she will help me. Did Lubia agree? Noah was surprised by this. I thought that girl didn't want to have anything to do with the elf kings. According to her, in order to determine whether there is a door between the human world and the elf world, it is necessary to travel around the world. In other words, her itinerary is exactly the same as mine, so it is not impossible to act together. Lotus's tone became a little serious. Moreover, Lubia is quite concerned about the Holy Elf King who was not on the Jade Throne in the beginning. She believes that we must not ignore the threat of this unknown Elf King and must find him. The Holy Elf King, whose whereabouts were unknown, was most likely corrupted by the otherworld darkness. Under such circumstances, where the crazy Elf King went and what he planned to do, it was believed that no one would not care. Since that was the case, finding the Holy Elf King became a top priority. Because of this, if it becomes a situation where we must fight, my combat power will be very precious. Since that is the case, it is not a bad thing to act together with me from the beginning. This should be Lubia's idea. Lotus glanced at Noah. Originally, Lubia seemed to want to invite you, but she probably guessed that you would refuse, so she gave up. I have done what I can do. Noah curled his lips and smiled. I'll leave the rest up to you. At first, when Noah came to this world, he only wanted to end things with Lotus and clean up the mess caused by the world fragment. However, it suddenly involved the otherworld darkness. Of course, Noah would not leave the people of this world in the lurch. Therefore, Noah won the Elven Sword Dance Festival and went to the Hall of True Sacrifice to free the Elf King, destroy the door of the otherworld, and eliminate the existence that was a threat to this world. In addition, the matter with Lotus had been resolved. Noah believed that even if he was not involved in the following matters, it would not matter. Even if the door still existed between the human realm and the elven realm, it was no longer a threat to the Elf King. Although the Holy Elf King's situation and whereabouts were still a mystery, with Lotus and Lubia, and the other Elf Kings as backup, it should be more than enough to deal with the Holy Elf King. Although nothing was absolute, Noah had already done what he could. After all, this world was not Noah's territory. It was impossible for Noah to protect the world forever. So, it was enough for him to do this. The following matters would be solved by the natives of this world. Both Lotus and Lubia had the ability to do so. Therefore, Noah had nothing to worry about. Iselia should have seen that I was planning to leave, so she did not ask me to find the Elf Kings, right? Noah sighed. Whether it's Iselia or Lubia, you can't underestimate them. I feel the same. Lotus could not help but smile, and then she was silent for a while. Are you really planning to leave? Do you think I'm lying? Noah said helplessly. I also have my own things to do. Really? Lotus was silent for a while, then she reached out and pressed her hand on her heart. Is it related to the thing in my heart? Something like that? Noah nodded. Just like you have the power of the Dark Elf King and have your own mission, I also have things to do. Before that, I can't have any regrets. That's true. Lotus sighed. Then, don't you plan to say goodbye to your companions? In the past few days, those girls have suffered enough. Now that the problems have been solved, and Claire and Linley's wishes have been fulfilled, if I tell them now that I plan to leave, won't they turn the world upside down? Noah spread out his hands. Let them continue to be happy. In other words, you plan to leave without saying goodbye? Lotus could not help but ask. Isn't that good? Can't you just help me pass on the message? Noah said irresponsibly. Help me tell those girls that I'm leaving temporarily. If fate wills it, we'll meet again. Also, tell Linley not to forget to arrange Myra's affairs and help me take care of her. Noah suddenly smiled. Tell Linley that when I come back, if I find out that Mira is not doing well, I'll make her but bleed. After saying this, Noah laughed, and under Lotus's stunned gaze, he jumped out of the airship. Only then did Lotus react. She hurriedly stepped forward and watched Noah's figure gradually disappear into the sea of clouds. For a long time, she did not speak. After a while, Lotus said helplessly and amusedly. What an incredible person. Perhaps there will be all kinds of big and small problems in the future. However, there will always be someone who can solve these problems. Without Noah, the world is still spinning. Chapter 1850. Clang, in the pure white world, the feathers emitted a gentle light as usual, and they swam back and forth in the space like little birds. They looked like leaves drifting in the ocean, and they gave off a peaceful feeling. However, if it was someone who often saw the condition of these feathers, they would definitely notice it. As compared to before, the feathers that were floating in the pure white world were no longer as free as before. This was because the feathers only hovered at a low altitude, and they definitely wouldn't float higher. It was as if there was something extremely frightening above them, causing these feathers to carry a trace of fear, completely not daring to fly higher. However, that was to be expected. In this pure white world, high up in the sky, a fluorescent yet crystal-like curtain shrouded the area, separating the pure white world into two halves. Below was a place where feathers could float freely. Above them, however, was a hair-raising scene. There, red shadows that resembled the Grim Reaper were swimming back and forth like ghosts. There were so many of them that they were as densely packed as locusts, giving one goosebumps. Under such a situation, the feathers that represented the worlds below the crystal barrier dared not approach the sky at all. They could only hover at a low altitude like frightened little animals. Apart from that, there was another scene at a low altitude in the pure white world. An outline with 10 patterns connected to it, and a sun was imprinted in the center. There were 24 engravings on the sun, and it was a stone plate that was suspended in midair. Around the stone plate, there were strange and incomprehensible words that were rotating slowly. On both sides of the stone plate, there were 2 petite young ladies with their eyes closed. It was as if they were controlling a sparkling and translucent crystal, causing it to release bursts of white mist that fused into the stone plate bit by bit. Buzz, the sparkling and translucent crystal floated in front of the stone plate. As it spun, it released bursts of white mist that fused into the strange stone plate. The white mist first enveloped the strange stone plate, then slowly seeped into the stone plate as if it was pouring into it. As the white mist fused into the stone plate changed bit by bit. In terms of appearance, it was the change in color. The stone plate that was originally as dazzling as gold slowly turned into a pure white color under the fusion of the white mist. Although it wasn't as dazzling as before, it gave people a feeling of restraint. As for the strange and incomprehensible words that were revolving around the stone plate, they were also turning white bit by bit, as if they were gradually fusing with the surrounding pure white world, making it difficult for people to notice. However, this also proved that under the control of Gaia and Alea, Noah's power was indeed transforming bit by bit. Noah, who had returned to the world, looked at this scene. He then looked at the crystal barrier that was blocking the red shadows and couldn't help but sigh. It's still not good. Although there had been some progress compared to the beginning, in terms of Noah's authority and sovereignty, the pure white color only occupied less than a quarter of the area. Even the strange and incomprehensible words around the stone plate only had a quarter of it turned white, while the rest was still the original color. Seeing this, how could Noah not understand? His power, sovereignty, and ability had only reached a quarter of the upgrade. He estimated that when the stone plate and words turned white, Noah's power, sovereignty, and ability could be considered to have been successfully upgraded. At that time, Noah would have the power to rival the world level and become the strongest existence. Are there still more than 3/4? Noah's murmur made Gaia and Alea's eyelids tremble, and they immediately opened their eyes. Seeing this scene, Noah's spirit was shaken as he quickly went forward. You're awake? Hearing this, Gaia and Alea were slightly startled as they looked at each other. Following which, not mentioning Alea, Gaia burst out laughing. What do you mean we're awake? Little Noah? Gaia said in a mocking manner. We've been awake the whole time. Don't tell me you thought we were asleep. Noah awkwardly scratched his face. No, it's just that you've been doing your homework all this time. I thought you wouldn't open your eyes before completing the mission. We were just concentrating, Alea said expressionlessly. Although it's not difficult to help you upgrade your power, it's very difficult to control the center of the space between worlds to release the imaginative power. It requires all of your focus. After all, we're only the will of the planet and the will of humans. We can't represent the world itself, Gaia sighed. So, when we were chosen by the world as your guide, we were the ones who were extremely surprised. Moreover, we're only relying on the imaginative power to temporarily stay in the space between worlds. Originally, with our power and existence, we definitely wouldn't be able to enter here, Alea continued Gaia's words. To be able to control the center of the space between worlds like this is an extremely honorable thing for us. Is that so? Noah bitterly smiled. Then you've been concentrating on your homework. Don't you plan to rest? We have restraining powers. There's no such thing as fatigue, Gaia said, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Little Noah, you don't have to worry about us. Yes, Alea nodded. You should take advantage of the time when your power is still being upgraded to do what you want to do. From Gaia and Alea's words and sentences, Noah could hear a kind of doting and thinking for him. Perhaps, to be able to help Noah before the final battle, for these two restraining powers, would be a very happy thing. In the world of the shape moon, as the will of the planet and humans, Gaia and Alea had always considered the problem of maintaining their own existence and the survival of the planet and humans. However, ever since they were chosen to be Noah's guides, Gaia and Alea were destined to not be limited to a small planet and race. Just like how Noah's power was being upgraded, Gaia and Alea were also being upgraded. However, what these two restraining powers were upgrading wasn't their power but their horizons and knowledge, or even their existence itself. Gaia and Alea should be very happy about this change, right? As for Noah, Gaia and Alea were treating him like family. Compared to when he was just the will of the planet and humans, their feelings were much richer. Therefore, Noah held a grateful attitude and nodded. I know. I will try my best not to leave behind any regrets. That's good. Gaia and Alea's expressions relaxed a little. Oh right. Gaia seemed to have suddenly thought of something. She flipped her hand and a piece of jade appeared in her small palm. She tossed it to Noah. This is for you. Noah was startled at first and subconsciously received the jade. Then, he reacted and spoke in surprise. What's this? Have you forgotten that we removed the souls of a dragon and a wolf from your body? Gaia pointed at the jade in Noah's hand. The dragon's soul was stored in this jade and has been sleeping ever since. I reckon that it's about time, so I'm giving it to you. By the way, Drake's soul has been with you ever since, Noah hurriedly said as he recalled this matter. What about Bio? We let that fantasy breed return to its original world and timeline so that it can accompany your former companions, Alea replied. Fantasy breeds are existences that materialize souls, so even if they only have souls, they can transform into a form and move freely. There won't be a problem. But this dragon is a different story. Gaia shrugged. This dragon can't transform into a form freely, so I stored it in this jade and let it sleep. Now, you can deal with it yourself. Noah tightened his grip on the jade and nodded. Chapter 1851. This was an unimaginable world. The sky was not blue in color, but it was as clear as a lake. The wind whistled past. It was neither too cold nor too hot. Although there was some humidity, it did not make people feel uncomfortable. The ground was filled with all kinds of colors. There were green grasslands. There were brown mountains. There was red soil. There were golden fields. Buildings were located in all directions. Among them, there were skyscrapers that resembled modern human society, but there were also castles and halls that resembled those of the Middle Ages. Mixed together, it did not make people feel chaotic. Instead, there was an indescribable sense of beauty. The most unbelievable thing was that there was no ocean in this boundless world. On Earth, the ocean took up almost 70% of the area. If this world was as vast as Earth, but there was no ocean, then one could imagine how vast the land here was. All these phenomena added together showed how unbelievable this world was. And this was indeed not the human world. This was the underworld. It was occupied by demons and fallen angels. There were powerful individuals everywhere in the underworld. It was said that there was a Hades below the underworld. That was where the souls of the dead returned to. In other words, this world could also be called hell. The demons and fallen angels occupied the left and right sides of the underworld. They had been fighting with each other all year round. In addition to the angels who lived in the heaven realm, the three major forces had been fighting since ancient times. It was only after the gods and demons died that the war stopped. Of course, that was already in the past. Not long ago, the angels, demons, and fallen angels signed a peace agreement under the witness of a famous god slayer. In other words, the angels, demons, and fallen angels had begun to reconcile. Not only did they stop fighting, but they also cooperated and shared each other's technology and information. Under such circumstances, it was conceivable that the three major forces, which had been exhausted by the existence of war, would enter a period of rapid development. However, this was still not enough. After all, we have lost the gods and demons. As a mythological system, we are on the verge of collapse. People from other mythological systems are likely to target us. Therefore, it is necessary to negotiate with other forces. In the Demon King's territory of the underworld demons, in a vast conference room in a magnificent building, Asashel held a glass of red wine in his hand as he sat on the sofa. He spoke in a tone that sounded both casual and solemn. At present, we have contacted Norse mythology first. Next, we need to find an opportunity to sit down and talk with Greek mythology, Indian mythology, Egyptian mythology, and Celtic mythology. It is troublesome just thinking about it. Although he looked very frivolous, this middle-aged man with a bad feeling was the governor of the fallen angels. He had the highest level of fallen angels with 12 wings. In terms of status, Asashel was equivalent to the emperor of the fallen angels. In terms of strength, Asashel was not the least bit weaker than the Demon King. Therefore, no matter how frivolous the words coming out of Asashel's mouth sounded, they couldn't just ignore them. At least, Sarsex, who was present, nodded. The status of this handsome man with red hair was not lower than that of the governor of the fallen angels. As for why, the reason was very simple. Sarsex, full name Sarsex Lucifer, was the current Lucifer of the 4 demon kings and was recognized as the most powerful one among the demon kings. Needless to say, the status of the demon king was obvious. In terms of strength, perhaps very few people knew that Sarsex had long surpassed the category of the demon king and reached the point where he could even kill gods. However, at that very moment, the terrifying existence said with a gentle expression, "Although it is troublesome, we have to talk about it. We have too many things that will be targeted by other mythological forces." Although demons, angels, and fallen angels were called the 3 major forces, they were only 3 major forces of a mythological system. The demons, angels, and fallen angels here all came from the Bible. Therefore, when the 3 major forces were combined, it was considered a complete mythological force. It was a pity that this mythological force had lost its only god. Even the 4 demon kings had all died. More than half of the high-level cadres of the fallen angels had died and could be said to be on the verge of death. In this way, other mythological forces would naturally target them. The strong preyed on the weak. The decline of a mythological force would attract the covetous eyes of other mythological forces. This was a matter of course. Because, no matter which mythological force it was, they needed to fight for territory. Of course, the territory here did not refer to the territory of every mythological force, but the territory of the human world. Humans were indispensable to every mythological force. The most basic need, faith. That was a need that every mythological force could not ignore. Demons, angels, and fallen angels also had territories with deep faith in the human world. Now that gods and demon kings were no longer around, other mythological forces coveted the faith occupied by demons, angels, and fallen angels. It was only natural for them to be restless. The first 4 demon kings died in the war. This is news that everyone knows. Sarsex sighed. However, the news of God's death has not been leaked so far. That's why the other mythological forces dare not make a move on us easily. After all, although there is only one God in our mythology, the God of the Bible is indeed very impressive. He alone occupies the position of a mythological god. Naturally, other forces would not dare to act rashly. Asashel swirled the red wine in his glass. Now, the God of the Bible is dead. If you demons had not elected new demon kings, and each of them is not weaker than the first 4 demon kings, and that guy Michael is quite capable and can deal with the gods of the other mythological forces, I'm afraid that some guys would not be able to hold themselves back and would have made a move on us long ago. However, the most important thing is that we have a god slayer on our side. Sarsex suddenly smiled. The news of God's death has been known by the other forces, but the news of a God Slayer on our side has also spread at the same time. There should be many mythological forces who are hesitant about this, right? In addition, this God Slayer is the current Red Dragon Emperor. Such a joking combination must have made those gods who are afraid of death worry, right? Asashel laughed as well. Well, there are people who scoff at the so-called God Slayer, but it's better to be safe than sorry. Which god is worried that if they die, the entire mythological system will be affected, so none of them dare to come over. Thanks to this, we have reached an agreement with the Nordic side. Sarsex raised his glass of red wine. This is already quite a big gain. Although the other side also came for the God Slayer at the beginning. Asashel shrugged. We just seized this opportunity to talk to Odin. I didn't expect it to really work out. Unfortunately, a lot of things happened in the middle. Sarsex sighed. In short, if we can reach an agreement with the Nordic side, then the other mythological forces will not dare to really make a move on us. There is no way to put an end to some small troubles. Asashel narrowed his eyes. I'm not afraid of them coming openly, but I'm afraid of them coming in the dark. This sentence, coming from you, the governor of the fallen angels, is really persuasive. Sarsex smiled bitterly. But you're right, we still can't relax. Michael is already in contact with the gods in Greece, right? Asashel nodded. We'll leave the Greek side to Michael for the time being, and we'll strengthen our defenses here for the time being. Sarsex nodded as well. At this moment, a small magic array flashed in front of Sarsex. It was a magic array for communication. Sarsex leaned over and listened for a while. After a while, a look of joy appeared on his face. Noah is back? Hearing this, Asashel's eyes lit up as well. That guy has disappeared for a whole month. Is he finally willing to come back? Chapter 1852. The Underworld, the Jemengli Domain. As a pure-blooded demon family that had been passed down since ancient times, the Jemengli family had a very vast territory. There was no ocean in the underworld, and the number of demons and fallen angels was much less than that of humans. The great wars since ancient times had caused many pure-blooded demons and fallen angels to die, causing the value of land in the underworld to not be as high as in the human world. The territory allocated to the pure-blooded demon families was surprisingly large. Other things aside, the territory of the Jemengli family was as large as an island nation. In this situation, the head of the Jemengli family could be called the king of a country in the human world. However, at this moment, in the main residence of the Jemengli family, who was like a king of a country, was passionately chatting with Noah, who was sitting across from him, in a guest hall. I heard that you've been training for the past month. There aren't many young demons as hardworking as you. Not to mention young demons, even those who have lived for a long time don't have such a concept. If possible, I really hope that other demons can learn from you. Hearing this, Noah could only smile sheepishly. The heavens took pity on him. In the past month, Noah had not been training, but traveling in various worlds. However, in other worlds, Noah had also been training, so it could not be said that it was wrong. The reason why the head of the Jemengli family said this was because Noah had found an excuse before leaving this world. At that time, Noah had just fought with Orpheus, and he immediately expressed that he wanted to leave. The battle between Noah and Orpheus was only known to the 4 demon kings, Athaziel, Laius, and their dependents. Therefore, when he told Laius and the others that he would be leaving for a period of time, as insiders, Laius and the others thought that Noah had discovered his shortcomings in the battle with Orpheus and was preparing to train. At that time, Noah did not explain in particular, so everyone thought that Noah really intended to train for a period of time. Although Jemengli didn't know about the battle between Noah and Orpheus, he knew that Noah was preparing to cultivate in the netherworld for a period of time, which was why he said that. Sazax has been talking to me about you all this time. He said that the reason why the other mythological system factions haven't done anything to us after learning that the gods here are no longer around is largely because of you, Jemengli said with a sigh. It's such a blessing for my Laius to be your fiancé. So, in this world, Noah and Laius were engaged. Although Noah and Laius did not deny the engagement to prevent their family members from marrying into other pure-blood demon families on their own accord, it was more of an act than anything else. Still, the Gimli family seemed to be looking forward to the engagement. Noah felt that if this continued, the fake would become real. He felt that it was about time, so he spoke to Jumanli. Well, actually, Laius and I, just as Noah was about to confess everything, the door to the living room opened. Oh. Azashel looked at Noah with a wicked smile on his face. You're really back. Father. Sazax first greeted Jemengli before turning his gaze to Noah with a smile. You're finally back. If you hadn't come back, Laius might have sent someone to look for you. I've just returned too. Noah spread his hands, his attitude towards Sazax and Azashel became casual. Laius should have returned to the human world, right? After all, the summer vacation ended after you left. She still has to go to school, so she naturally has to go back to school. Sazax chattered as he approached. Speaking of which, you're still a teacher in Laius' school. The summer vacation is over, don't you have to report? I'm just a little infirmary teacher. I don't have any actual classes to attend, so it's fine. Noah pursed his lips. Of course, I've also asked Laius to help me apply for leave. It's fine. Being a teacher is so leisurely. I want to try being a teacher too. Azashel sat opposite Noah and complained. While you're so leisurely, we've been so busy. Is that so? Noah immediately asked. Did anything special happen during this time? Something big did happen, Sazax said as he sat down as well. It has something to do with you too. How about you listen in? It has something to do with me too. Noah raised his eyebrows slightly. Seeing that Noah, Sazax, and Azashel were about to talk about something important, Jemengli stood up. In that case, I won't disturb you from talking about business. Please make yourselves at home. With that, Jemengli immediately retreated. Then, Sazax and Azashel explained to Noah an important thing that had happened in the past month. During Noah's temporary absence for a month, different things did happen, big and small. And among these things, the most noteworthy one was the visit of the Norse main god, Odin. After the peace agreement was concluded, demons, angels, and fallen angels began to contact the forces of other mythological systems. The main purpose was naturally to achieve true peace so that the existences of the various mythological systems would no longer fight. However, no matter which mythological force it was not so easy to conclude an agreement. In order to compete for faith and resources, each mythological system was quite exclusive. Therefore, when they first came into contact with the forces of other mythological systems, they hit a wall everywhere. The only exception was Norse mythology. As the main god of Norse mythology, Odin did not refuse the contact here. Instead, he took the initiative to propose a visit here. According to Azashel, in the beginning, Odin's visit was only for Noah, the god slayer. For those who were called gods, they really had to pay attention to the existence that could kill gods. Odin's visit was probably to confirm whether Noah, the god slayer, really existed. Unfortunately, at that time, Noah had already left. But Odin's visit also gave Sazax and Azashel a chance. In the end, under the persuasion of Sazax and Azashel, Odin finally agreed to conclude a peace agreement. However, just like when demons, angels, and fallen angels reached a peace agreement with each other, there were also many people who opposed it internally. In Norse, gods who refused to contact the other mythological forces also existed. Among them, there was even a god who launched a large-scale attack in order to destroy the peace agreement. Loki. The evil god of Norse mythology who was Odin's sworn brother. This evil god was a member of the extremely exclusive gods. For Odin, who took the initiative to contact the other mythological forces and even intended to conclude a peace agreement, Loki was extremely dissatisfied and even had the intention to kill. He actually brought Fenrir and a large number of legendary monsters that he had created and launched a large-scale attack. Fenrir? Noah said in surprise. Don't tell me you're referring to the Fenrir with the title of the god slayer wolf? The Fenrir here was not Linley's magic ice elf, but the most famous magical beast in Norse mythology. Legend had it that when it opened its mouth, its upper jaw and lower jaw could hold up heaven and earth. Legend had it that because its personality was too fierce, it was imprisoned by the dwarves. Legend had it that it escaped at the end of the world and swallowed the sun and the main god Odin in one bite. Legend had it that it was the culprit that caused Norse's greatest tragedy, the twilight of the gods. Its father was the evil god Loki. However, its power surpassed that of the gods, including Loki. If one was hit by its sharp teeth and claws, even a god would not be able to avoid death. Therefore, it was also known as the god slayer wolf. In the box, Fenrir was one of the final trials of humans. In this world, Fenrir was ranked in the top 10 of the world's top powerhouses. Such an existence, together with a god and a large number of legendary monsters, launched a large-scale attack. The disaster caused by that was not a joke, right? Then how did you repel Fenrir? Noah looked at Sazax. Only you and Achuka can repel Fenrir, right? But the person who did it was not me. Sazax reported a name that shocked Noah. It was Orpheus who repelled Fenrir. Chapter 1853. Unlike before, Noah now knew what it meant to be in the top 10 of the world's strongest. It did not refer to the ranking of all the existences in a single mythical force, but it was a ranking that took into account all the strong existences in the current world, including the gods of various mythical systems. To be able to be in the top 10 meant that one could be among the strongest. At present, the top 10 of the world's strongest were the following figures. The infinite dragon god, Orpheus. The god of destruction, Shiva of the three Hindu gods. The god of protection, Vishnu of the three Hindu gods. The god of creation, Brahma of the three Hindu gods. The celestial emperor of Mount Meru, Indra. The thunder god in Norse mythology, Thor. The magic wolf in Norse mythology, Fenrir. The god of the underworld in Greek mythology, Hades. The sun god in Egyptian mythology, Aten. The god of light in Celtic mythology, Ruger. The top 10 were the 10 strongest existences in all the mythical forces. In this ranking, except for Orpheus who was recognized as the strongest and ranked first, the rest were not ranked first. The difference in strength was not big enough to clearly distinguish the ranking. Because of this, in addition to the top 10 existences, there were some existences who had the ability to squeeze into this ranking. For example, before being sealed, the two heavenly dragons were at this level. Another example was that as a surpasser, Sazax and Achuka also had the ability to enter. And Fenrir was among them. Therefore, in Noah's opinion, if Loki had really brought Fenrir, the only ones who could fight Fenrir were Sazax and Achuka. However, Noah never thought that it would be Orpheus who made the move. I'm afraid that no one thought that Orpheus would suddenly appear and make a move. Asashel seemed to recall the scene at that time and could not help but be speechless. That's also Wally's fault, right? Wally? Noah frowned. Wally also appeared? He had the blood of the former demon king Lucifer in him, but also half-human blood, so he was chosen by the god of annihilation and was known as the strongest white dragon emperor in history, Wally Lucifer. That fellow had actually appeared as well? The white dragon emperor with the bloodline of the previous Lucifer seems to be eyeing Fenrir's fangs, Sazax said. Joining such a dangerous terrorist organization like the Disaster Group and becoming enemies with various mythical forces, even if he is known as the strongest white dragon emperor in history, with Wally Lucifer's ability, it is still not enough to deal with the various forces, so he gathered a group of teammates around him. Wally wants Fenrir to be the trump card of his team, right? Asashel said helplessly. Although that brat longs for battle, it's not that he doesn't want to live anymore. With Fenrir's fangs that can actually kill gods, he would even dare to challenge the gods of various mythological powers, right? Orpheus seems to have come with Wally. Sazex was equally helpless. In the beginning, Wally seemed to want to use his own strength to capture Fenrir, but in the end, Orpheus still took action. Since Orpheus took action, the result was needless to say. Although Fenrir was one of the top 10 powerhouses, as mentioned before, Orpheus was an existence that could be said to be infinite, and his own strength had already reached a terrifying level. Even if the rest of the top powerhouses were to join forces, they would still not be a match for Orpheus. This may be a little vague, but with Box-Ting's level, the gap was more clear. From Noah's point of view, the top 10 powerhouses in the world should all have 4 digits. Not to mention others, Sazex and Echuca, who could be ranked among the top powerhouses, had 4 digits, and they were more powerful existences among the 4 digits. The rest of the top powerhouses naturally had 4 digits as well. Orpheus, on the other hand, had 3 digits. Therefore, Orpheus was indisputably the strongest. In the beginning, even Noah, who had mastered the ability to use 2 clones at the same time, was defeated after facing Orpheus. He was on the verge of death and was almost killed. Against such an existence, there was only one result for Fenrir. A wolf that could slay a god was almost killed by Orpheus, Asashel lamented. You definitely can't imagine the scene at that time. My eyeballs almost fell out when I saw it. Orpheus lives up to his reputation as the most powerful dragon god, an existence that even gods and demon kings fear. Sazak's expression turned solemn. With such an existence joining the group of disasters, the threat was really terrifying. In the end, Wally successfully got Fenrir. Asashel spread his hands. And we took advantage of the time when Loki was scared witless by Orpheus to take down that evil god. Then, Odin would bring him back to Northern Europe to punish him. At this point, the peace talks with Northern Europe were finalized. I didn't expect that to happen. Noah frowned. And, Wally actually got Fenrir. Wouldn't that be terrible? It'll definitely be bad. After all, it's a legendary monster that can even kill a god, Asashel said casually. But, even if he got Fenrir, it's impossible for him to completely control that power. So, we guessed that even if Wally could control Fenrir, it would cause Fenrir's power to be greatly reduced, Sazak said. Although the wolf that can cause harm to gods is still a threat, it's not as scary as Fenrir at its peak. If you were there at that time, it would be interesting to see. Asashel smiled slyly. The god slayer subdued the wolf. That would definitely scare the guys from the other mythical forces half to death, right? Unfortunately, I'm not interested in that wolf. Noah pursed his lips and then thought of a problem. By the way, why do you say that this has something to do with me? Is it because Odin came for me? Sazax and Asashel looked at each other. Although Wally is a member of the group of disasters, it's impossible for him to take the leader with him, right? Asashel said. According to that guy, the reason why Orpheus followed him was entirely because Orpheus thought that if he acted with Wally, there was a high chance that he could cross paths with you. After all, you are the Red Dragon Emperor, and Wally is the White Dragon Emperor. The 2 dragons have been enemies since ancient times. That kind of relationship is like fate. It's absolutely impossible for you not to meet. Sazax looked at Noah. And Orpheus seems to be very interested in you, so he followed Wally. He only attacked Fenrir because it was convenient. That's what the White Dragon Emperor told us. Noah was speechless for a moment. It turned out that the reason why the top 10 powerhouses in the world had such a tragedy was all because of him. Moreover, it was in the form of being easily dealt with. In this world, Orpheus was the only one who could easily deal with an existence that was one of the more powerful ones among the 4-digit figures. However, Noah heard that in this world, there was actually an existence as powerful as Orpheus, or even more powerful than him. However, it was basically impossible for that existence to appear in this world. It did not even belong to this world, so Orpheus was the strongest. If it weren't for Orpheus, to deal with Fenrir, I guess Sazax and Echuca would have to take action. However, by the time Sazax and Echuca arrived, we would have been long dead. Asashel scratched his cheek. By the way, at that time, except for a few higher-ups of the fallen angels, including me, who fought against Loki and Fenrir, the rest were only Leah's and her family. Leah's? Noah was shocked. Let them fight against the god and the god-slaying wolf? Are you crazy? It can't be helped. No one thought that the Lord Evil God would descend with the famous god-slaying wolf. Asashel spread his hands. In addition, Leah's family has been frequently fighting against the terrorists of the Calamity Squad during this period of time. The pressure is probably not small. So, it's better for you to hurry back to your school and take charge. Noah sighed. He had encountered troubled times. Chapter 1854. After talking to Sazax and Asashel, Noah decided to return to the academy the next day. Frankly speaking, Noah was neither a demon nor an angel nor a fallen angel. At the same time, he was not a member of any other mythical faction. There was no reason for him to act on behalf of any faction. However, just because he did not belong to any faction did not mean that Noah could not be close to people from other factions. Leah's, Tsang Na, and the two girls' families were all Noah's students. Sazax and Achuka, on the other hand, were somewhat indebted to Noah. Back then, if Sazax and Achuka had not sacrificed a month to accompany Noah in his special training in the alternate dimension, Noah would not have been able to take the solid step of using more than 2 clones at the same time. As the saying goes, the beginning of everything is the hardest. If Sazax and Achuka had not helped Noah with his special training, Noah would not have been able to take the solid step of using more than 2 clones at the same time. Then, he would not have been able to achieve the results of using 3, 4, or even 5 clones at the same time. Moreover, for Noah's special training, Asashel had also done his best to arrange things for Noah. He contacted Sazax and Achuka, prepared the alternate dimension, and even took on the roles of the 2 demon kings. Noah would not have been able to carry out the special training as well. With all these factors added together, Noah's side was very obvious even though he did not join any faction. It was not impossible to stay out of it, but it was up to Noah whether he was willing to do so. And would Noah be willing to watch Leah's and the other girls fight hard while he, the teacher, watched from the sidelines? The answer was naturally no. With that in mind, Noah had to at least return to Colt King Academy to oversee things and help Leah's and the others come up with plans. He also had to watch from the back to prevent the girls from dying prematurely. Sazax and Asashel probably asked Noah to return to the academy to oversee things because of his good relationship with Leah's and the others. Otherwise, with Noah's power, Sazax and Asashel could have asked him to do something more beneficial for the 3 factions instead of guarding 2 young pure-blooded demons and their families. In other words, while Sazax and Asashel valued Noah's strength and ability, they did not have the intention of using him. Noah was well aware of that, and simply decided to return to the academy. But before that, there was one more thing Noah wanted to do. Noah returned to the room where he had lived for a while under the guidance of Gemengli's servant. As soon as Noah returned to his room, he took out the gift card. As the gift card flashed, a piece of dragon jade appeared in his hand. Clang! Almost at the same time, the dragon jade lit up like a crystal ball, its color becoming brighter. Looking at this scene, Noah smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry. How do you feel, Drake?" As soon as he spoke, an incomparably heavy voice came from the dragon jade. "Compared to when I fused into your soul, although I'm now living as a host in the jade, I feel much more free. At least I won't be forced into a deep sleep when you don't need my power. Should I say that this situation is good?" Speaking of which, ever since he met Noah, Drake had indeed been in a tragic situation. Because his power had fully fused with Noah's authority, Drake was also fused into Noah's soul. When Noah did not use the power that originally belonged to Drake, Drake would be forced into a deep sleep. Later, Gaia and Alea separated Drake from Noah's soul, claiming that he had contaminated Noah's soul. Since then, Drake had always been in a deep sleep state, only waking up when Noah returned to this world. Wasn't this a tragedy? He still remembered that when he first woke up and found that he had separated from Noah's soul, Drake was extremely shocked. After all, without using the power that originally belonged to Drake would not wake up. Naturally, he would not know why he was separated from Noah's soul. Drake did not even know that Noah was special, let alone that Noah did not belong to this world. Simply put, it was the feeling of, why did the whole world change when I woke up? Noah was too embarrassed to tell Drake that because Gaia and Alea thought that his existence was polluting his soul, the two restraints separated him from Noah's soul. If he told Drake this, Noah felt that Drake would definitely cry. Thus, Noah simply lied, saying that there was a problem with his authority that caused this situation to happen. In the end, Drake really did not feel the existence of the authority that originally belonged to him in Noah's body, so he believed this reason. But, this way, if I meet that white guy again, he will definitely make fun of me, right? Drake said self-deprecatingly. As his old enemy, I am now only a soul body, not even a divine artifact. My battle with Arubian will probably end here, right? Saying this, Drake's words had a trace of relief, but also a trace of unwillingness. Noah had heard Drake say this before. After so many years of fighting each other, the two heavenly dragons had already forgotten why they were fighting so fiercely in the first place. Therefore, there was no enmity or grudge between the two heavenly dragons. They were just like old enemies. Now that this relationship was announced to end, Drake felt relieved, but he also felt that he had lost in the end. After all, no matter what, it was Drake who had a problem, right? Hearing the self-deprecation in Drake's words, Noah also felt a sense of guilt. He did not expect that Gaia and Alea's actions would have such an impact on Drake. Now, Noah could only rack his brain to think of a way to make it up to Drake. However, at this time, Athena's voice sounded in Noah's heart. If you want to continue fighting, it is not impossible. Huh? Noah was stunned. Oh. Drake was surprised. I have never heard this voice before. It seems to be different from the wolf hiding in your soul. Whose voice is it? It seemed that Drake could hear Athena's voice. There is no need to mind my existence. I have only abandoned my past identity and position and obtained a rebirth as a subordinate. Athena said calmly. However, I can't just sit by and watch the warrior who wants to continue fighting. Furthermore, you're a dragon. In the past, I was also the existence that controlled the dragons. If I do that, it will be beneficial for the person who wishes to continue fighting. Crimson Dragon, you just have to tell me. Do you want to continue fighting? You were an existence that controlled dragons in the past? You are quite bold. Drake laughed. Although I do not know who you are, I will answer your question. I am the Crimson Dragon Emperor, the crystallization of power. Drake declared boldly. If I do not feel happy about fighting, then I am not a dragon. Well said. Athena's goddess of war seemed to have been ignited by Drake's bold words. Since that is the case, I will lend you a hand. But, what do you want to do? Drake asked curiously. In my current state, it will be difficult for me to fight, right? It's simple. Just return to your original state, Athena said. In other words, return to the state of a divine artifact. Return to the state of a divine artifact? Drake was shocked. Return to the state of a divine artifact? Noah could not help but exclaim. Can you do that? Athena? Based on the current situation, it shouldn't be too difficult to do so, Athena said. My beloved, have you forgotten that you once obtained the method to create a divine artifact from the 12-winged fallen angel? After hearing Athena's words, Noah suddenly remembered. In order to make Noah a suppressive force for the three factions to form a peace treaty, Asashel had indeed given Noah the method to create a divine artifact. So, it is very simple. Athena said indifferently. Create a divine artifact. Chapter 1855. Chariot King Academy, the Human World. It was noon, and the students of Chariot King Academy were having their break time after class. Even if one were to look in from outside the academy gates, they could clearly see the students in Chariot King Academy's uniform gathered in groups of 2s and 3s. They were either eating lunch on benches, or spreading cloth on the lawn as they chatted. It was a lively scene. Laughter and chatter could be heard from the academy. The midday sun shone warmly on each of the students. The scene of the students laughing under the sun made people feel warm from the bottom of their hearts, and they were strongly aware of the beauty of campus life. Still, the commoners did not know that the person behind this seemingly ordinary academy was not a human, but a demon. Of course, there were many demons in Chariot King Academy, but they all mingled with the commoners. It sounded unbelievable, but that was the truth. Just like how humans were divided into good and evil, demons were divided into good and evil as well. Fortunately, the demons living in Chariot King Academy were not of the unorthodox path. Of course, there were times when the students were enjoying school life, while the aberrant demons could only work in the dark, doing things that the commoners could not do or even know about. Under such circumstances, a group of young girls in their prime were strolling along a small path in the academy. It was a group of girls who were adorable in every aspect. Among the girls, there was a very stylish boy. In the middle of the girls, there was a leader with long red hair that reached her waist. It was none other than Leith and her kin. "I'm so tired." Elena shrugged her shoulders with a weak look on her face. "Today is going to be another tough battle, yeah." Genova sighed as well. "It's so much more tiring than when I was carrying out annihilation missions in the church, that can't be helped." Zhu and I had a rare look of bitterness as well. "We've been fighting all this time. We've reached the point where we have to fight terrorists every day, haven't we?" Labelle's voice was filled with hardship. "I really don't understand why those terrorists keep targeting this town. If this continues, even I, a Phoenix member known as the Phoenix, won't make it." Sorry," Aisha said guiltily. "I can only heal everyone's wounds, but I can't restore stamina, mana, or spirit. If I could, everyone wouldn't be so tired." "Senior Aisha didn't do anything wrong," the kitten said in a monotonous voice. "So, please don't apologize." "Kitten's right." Yudu was the only one who still had some spirit, and his smile even had a hint of sunshine in it. "We're already grateful that Aisha helped us heal our wounds. There's no need to apologize." "Yudu's right." Leith patted Aisha's head as well. "Aisha's," she said with Yudu. "I'm here," Leith said. As she spoke, she turned around and spoke to the two girls behind her. "Gasper, Lasvias, you've seen Aisha's hard work, haven't you?" Taking a closer look, other than those present, there were two more people following behind Leah's. One of them was a beautiful girl wearing the uniform of the Colt King Academy. She had shoulder-length platinum short hair, a pair of elf-like ears, and a pair of red eyes. The other girl was not wearing a student uniform, but a female teacher's blue uniform. She had beautiful silver hair that reached her waist, and her figure was tall and voluptuous. She was about 17 or 18 years old. Gasper was referring to the girl in the Colt King Academy's uniform. Lasvias was referring to the girl in the teacher's uniform. Both of them nodded at Leith's words. Senior Aisha is really working hard," Gasper said timidly as he shrunk his petite body. "I'll work as hard as Senior Aisha. Please don't think of me as useless." Saying so, tears began to accumulate in Gasper's eyes, as if he would cry at any time. It was easy to see how timid he was, and how he seemed to be very self-abased. As for Lasvias, he coughed and made a very formal evaluation. Although she didn't go to the front line, as a healer, Aisha's power is very precious. Without Aisha's healing, we would have fallen long ago. So Aisha's contribution is huge. No. There's no such thing. A faint blush appeared on Aisha's face, and she seemed to be feeling a little shy. At this moment, Lasvias changed the topic. "However, we can't go on like this. If the terrorists keep attacking us at the current pace, then sooner or later, all of us here will fall." Lasvias' words made everyone's expression turn heavy. This was because everyone knew that Lasvias's words were not without reason. Since the end of the summer vacation, when Leith and the others returned from the underworld, the attacks from the disaster cluster had almost never stopped. At first, it was still fine. The opponents they encountered were just some insignificant characters who seemed to be the basic members of the disaster cluster. Although these people controlled some magical creatures, they did not cause too much trouble. Moreover, the disaster cluster's attacks were not so frequent in the beginning. It was about once every 3 to 4 days, and Leith and the others could still handle it. However, the situation changed after the visit of the Norse main god, Odin. At that time, Leith and the others directly faced the Norse evil god and the legendary-level ferocious demonic wolf. Against such an opponent was no different from courting death, given the abilities of Leith and the others. Fortunately, at that time, Asashel and a few of the fallen angels' cadres were also present. Wally also led his team into the battlefield. Even the infinite dragon god, Orpheus, who was known as the strongest existence, made a move. Only then did Leith and the others luckily survive. However, since then, the disaster squad seemed to have raised the threat level of Laius and her party by several levels. Not only had the strength of the attackers increased by a lot, but their numbers had also increased by a lot, and the attacks had become more frequent. Among them, there were even individuals who had divine artifacts and people who could use magic and magic. After being attacked continuously, even Leith and the others felt that they could not hold on for much longer. The fact that we survived the hands of a god, and even the top 10 demonic wolves in the world, seems to have made us dangerous in the eyes of the terrorists. LaBelle sighed. Undoubtedly, there was almost nothing we could do to help at that time. We were only responsible for annihilating the mass-produced monsters brought by Loki. The monsters created by a god, even if they were mass-produced, and each of them was much weaker than an existence like Fenrir, we could deal with them. That also raised our evaluation in the hearts of the terrorists. Zhu Nai shook his head. No, just being able to survive such a battlefield is enough to raise our evaluation a lot. In fact, not only among the terrorists, but also in the demon realm, the evaluation of Minister Leith has also risen a lot. Yudu smiled slightly. The higher-ups have begun to look at the minister in a new light, thinking that if the minister were to debut in the future, she would definitely have great achievements, so it's not all a bad thing. That's true. Leith smiled and pulled herself together. All right, my lovely dependents. Although it will be very tiring, we still have to keep our spirits up. We can't let others think that we, the Jumanli dependents, can't even survive this little ordeal. Do you understand? Yes. Everyone's spirits were suddenly lifted, and they responded loudly. At this moment, a chuckle sounded. Seeing that you can still be so energetic, probably even the terrorists will feel afraid, right? Chapter 1856. The sudden voice startled everyone in the group. Then, everyone saw it. At the front of the path, a young man wearing a black shirt, black pants, and a white coat, dressed like an ordinary person, was waving at them. Apart from Gasper and Lasvia's, everyone else's eyes widened when they saw the young man, and their expressions changed. Teacher Isha and Xiao Mao both cried out in surprise. Lord Noah. Laibel covered her mouth, and a look of joy appeared in her eyes. Laius, Junai, Irina, Genova, and Yudu were also surprised and delighted. Only Gasper and Los Vias looked at Noah in surprise. Then, the group of people ran in the direction of Noah. Teacher Isha hugged Noah's arm happily. You're back. Teacher. Kitten's expression was as emotionless as usual, but her voice was a little louder than usual. Welcome back. You're finally back. Leia's led the rest of her kin to Noah's side. When did you come back? I've just returned to the Gemengli's house yesterday and stayed there for a night. It was only this morning that I asked Sazax to activate the teleportation circle so that I could return to the Supernatural Research Department's office. Noah stroked Aisha and the kittens' heads before looking at Laius. It's been a month since I last saw you. Looks like you've had a harder time than I thought. As he said that, Noah noticed Gasper and Los Valles, and asked curiously. And there are some unfamiliar faces? Let me introduce them to you, teacher. Laius smiled and turned to point at Gasper and Los Valles. Both of them are my kin, Yizichin said. Los Valles stepped forward as Laius's voice trailed off. Greetings, I'm Los Valles, Laius Gimli's rook. I've heard a lot about you, my lady. Los Valles is like teacher Noah, a teacher at Full King Academy. He just became my kin not long ago. Laius's lips curled up slightly. And Los Valles's true identity is the Norse Valkyrie. Valkyrie? Noah looked at Los Valles in surprise. The Valkyrie was a demigod in Norse mythology, also known as the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie in Norse mythology meant the glutton for corpses, which slowly evolved into the woman who chooses the dead in battle, and even the dream lover who appears in front of the hero's eyes. As the name suggested, the Valkyrie was a divine clan that had a close relationship with the dead and heroes. Some of them were the daughters of kings from the human realm, some were the children of Odin, and some were warriors who swore to serve the gods and were chosen by the gods to ascend to the heavens. Their main job was to lead the souls of the heroes who died on the battlefield to the Hall of Valor so that the heroes could become heroic spirits and fight for the gods. Therefore, in Norse mythology, the Valkyrie was a very famous deity. Although she was only a demigod and her power was far inferior to those real deities, in terms of fame, the Valkyrie was even more famous than many deities in Norse mythology. Everyone often thought that the men chosen by the Valkyrie had the potential to become powerful warriors even if they were not heroes. In fact, in Norse mythology, many men who mated with the Valkyrie did indeed have extraordinary fame and combat strength. Some even became partners with heroic spirits and wrote many beautiful stories together. As the saying went, every hero had an excellent woman by his side. The Valkyrie, who had a close relationship with the heroes, was almost the perfect embodiment of this saying. Noah did not expect that someone from the race that enjoyed such a great reputation in Norse mythology would become a demon's kin. It really surprised him. Lothvias was a bodyguard brought by the Norse main god, Odin, when he came to visit not long ago. However, after some twists and turns, Lothvias became my kin. Lias put her hands on her waist. By the way, Lothvias is proficient in all kinds of Norse magic. He is very proficient in both offensive and defensive magic, and with the buff of Rook, he would not be any weaker than a superior demon. It's just some research. Compared to Lord Noah, I still have a long way to go. Lothvias quickly shook his head, but his eyes were full of curiosity when he looked at Noah. Before I left Lord Odin, I often heard Lord Odin mention that there was a very famous god-slayer here. Even Lord Odin could not help but come to investigate, but he did not see her. Now that I have finally met her in person, it is an honor. It is also an honor to meet the famous Valkyrie of Norse. Noah shrugged. Miss Lothvias is also a teacher at Colt King Academy. She is in the same position as I am in the workplace. There is no need to be so respectful. Is that so? Lothvias tilted his head and nodded. If that is the case, I will just call you Master Noah. Please take care of me. Please take care of me. Noah smiled and then looked at Gasper. You are also Leah's kin, right? Gasper did not respond to Noah's greeting. Instead, he looked as if he was startled and hid behind Zhu Nai. Era. Zhu Nai smiled gently as if he was talking to a naughty little brother. Don't be so rude, Gasper. Hurry up and say hello to the teacher. Yes. Gasper stuck his head out from behind Zhu Nai and spoke timidly. I'm Minister Laius's bishop. I'm looking forward to learning from you. Gasper is a hybrid between a vampire and a human. He also has a divine artifact. Lias introduced proudly. A divine artifact that can freeze the time of everything within its field of vision. Forbidden Baylor view. Freeze time? Noah raised an eyebrow. There is such a divine artifact? The ability to control time was no ordinary ability. Among other things, Noah's phoenix form was a kind of authority that could reach Godspeed through time control. With the authority of Godspeed, Noah was almost invincible against opponents who did not have the mind's eye skill. Although the divine artifact of Gasper's kin was used to stop the time of a target, and not the ability to shorten the time to reach the target like Godspeed, it was still quite amazing. If it was not for the limitation of being able to stop the time of an object within sight, Gasper's divine artifact would probably become a divine artifact. In addition, Gasper was a vampire hybrid and could use vampire abilities. Even if he did not reach the level of having both a divine artifact and a demon king's bloodline like Wally, it was still terrifying enough. Such a person is just a bishop? Noah could not help but ask. If it's just a bishop, is there a way for him to be reincarnated into a demon? It was a chess piece that could reincarnate other individuals into a demon's kin that belonged solely to oneself, a demon chess piece. It was a chess piece that could determine its value based on the reincarnated target's various abilities, talents, and strength. Among all the chess pieces, the value of the bishop piece was the same as the value of the knight piece, which was only equivalent to 3 pawn pieces. Back then, even Isha and Irina had to use 4 pawns to successfully reincarnate. How could this mixed blood, who had the abilities of a vampire and such a powerful artifact, be able to successfully reincarnate with just 1 bishop? With Gasper's value, in Noah's opinion, let alone at a bishop equivalent to 3 pawns, even at a rook equivalent to 5 pawns, wouldn't be able to successfully reincarnate, right? Unless it's a queen that's worth 9 pawn soldiers. Otherwise, there should be no way for Gasper to successfully reincarnate. What was going on? Chapter 1857. Looking at Gasper, who was timidly hiding behind Zhu Nai and did not even dare to look him in the eye, Noah found it hard to believe that this guy would have such a foul artifact, and that he was a vampire that lived on blood. Was this the so-called, you can't judge a book by its cover? However, how did Gasper use the bishop's pawn to successfully reincarnate into a demon? After thinking about it, Noah could only think of a special situation. Could it be that this child did not use an ordinary demon pawn, but a mutated pawn? A mutated pawn. As the name suggested, it was some mutated individuals among the demon pawns. They were no different from ordinary demon pawns, but there was only one difference. That was, even if the reincarnation target was extremely valuable, this value could be ignored, and a target that required multiple pawns to be reincarnated could be solved with only 1. This kind of rare pawn was not uncommon. Among the superior demons who could have their own kin and pawns, the probability of them appearing was about 1 in 10. This Gasper was probably reincarnated using a mutated demon pawn, right? That's right, I have a mutated bishop pawn in my hand, and Gasper used that pawn to reincarnate. Lias confirmed Noah's guess. Gasper is indeed very talented, but his only flaw is that he is very timid and dangerous. Dangerous? Noah blinked. How do you say that? Simply put, Gasper could not control his artifact. Zhu Nai helped Lias explain. Gasper has a very powerful potential. Even if he does nothing, his strength is increasing every day, but he is completely unable to control it freely. Lord Sazax thinks that this is very dangerous, and the higher-ups of the demon's side also think that if Gasper is left alone, his ability will go berserk, so Gasper has been sealed in the room before. Yudu continued Zhu Nai's words. However, recently, the minister's evaluation has risen a lot, and the higher-ups think that the current minister may be able to control Gasper, so they let the minister unseal Gasper. In that case, Lias did say before that she already had a bishop. Now it seemed that the bishop was Gasper, and the reason why he had not appeared all this time was because he did not control his power well and was sealed. Now, as Lias grew and her rating rose, the title of bishop was finally unsealed. Thanks to everyone's help, Gasper can now more or less control his artifact. At least he can ensure that he will not unconsciously activate his ability in his daily life. Lias Gasper's head. All that's left is to wait for Gasper to be able to activate his power and use his abilities on his own in battle. Yes, yes. Gasper shrunk his neck, but he mustered up his courage. I'll work. The Gasper's people suddenly sighed. The corner of Noah's lips curled up as he looked at Leah's and the other Jumanli's kin. In the demon world, as long as one was a superior demon, one could obtain a demon pawn, become a king, and obtain a family. Among these pawns, excluding the king, the remaining ones were a queen, 2 rooks, 2 bishops, 2 knights, and 8 pawns. And the Gasper's people gathered in front of Noah all had their own pawns. King, Leah's Gasper. Queen, Himajima Junai. Rook, Tashiro Bayan. Rook, Los Valles. Bishop, Rebel Phoenix. Bishop, Gasper. Knight, Genova. Knight, Kiba Yudo. Pawn, x4, Wisteria Irina. Pawn, x4, Aisha Aljet. At this point, Leah's demon pawns were all used up, and all her family members were gathered. This also proved that Leah's truly had the ability to take charge, and was no longer the little princess of the Gasper family. Next, in the battle against the disaster squad, the Gasper's people should be able to shine, right? At least, Noah, with his superb senses, could feel it very clearly. With Leah's in the lead, whether it was Junai, Kitten, Labelle, Genova, Irina, Aisha, or Yudo, the aura of the group was much stronger than before. Come to think of it, in this month of continuous fighting against the disaster squad terrorists, these people's strength should have been sufficiently improved, right? Moreover, Los Valles and Gasper's aura were also extraordinary. Although Gasper's aura was still very unstable, and he had not completely controlled his divine artifact, among the Gasper's people, she was probably the one with the most potential and talent. Therefore, the future of the Gasper's people could still be slightly looked forward to. Just as Noah was thinking about this, Kitten suddenly said, "By the way, Gasper is not a girl, but a boy who likes to dress up." Teacher, don't get it wrong. When this sentence jumped out of Kitten's mouth and into Noah's ears, Noah was completely stunned. Looking at Gasper, who was as cute as a doll and timid like a small animal hiding behind Leah's and Junai, with a pair of watery eyes that looked as if tears would fall out at any time, Noah's heart was in turmoil. Teacher? Aisha noticed Noah's strange behavior and asked curiously. What's wrong with you? No. Nothing. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched, and he looked up at the sky. I just feel like the world is playing a joke on me. No, it's playing a joke on everyone. A joke. Yes. A very overboard joke. Noah's return made the hearts of the Gasper's people, who were originally tired of dealing with the attacks of the disaster squad, as if a clear spring had been injected into their hearts, and all the pressure disappeared. With Noah, the God Slayer, no matter what the disaster squad did, it would be impossible for them to succeed in the end, right? Leah's and the others had been very worried that if they were defeated by the disaster squad, the school and the town would be occupied by the disaster squad and become a stronghold. By then, the safety of the people in the town would be almost guaranteed if they were dominated by a group of terrorists. Now, with Noah's presence, this worry could be swept away. This was undoubtedly a stimulant, and the Gasper's people no longer had any worries. Hence, Lias quickly informed Sang Na of the matter, which left her pleasantly surprised. It was only then that Noah learned that apart from the Gasper's people, the Seede's people who belonged to Cana were also dealing with the terrorist attacks of the disaster squad. During this period, the attacks on the town had been fought by the Gasper's people and the Seede's people. So, like the Gasper's people, the Seede's people were also accumulating fatigue and pressure, and could finally breathe a sigh of relief now. As she was still dealing with the aftermath of the attack outside, Cana could not return to the school to greet Noah, so she let Lias be her representative to greet him first before paying a visit and greeting him personally. Since Sang Na, who was known as an ice beauty, was so respectful towards Noah, it could be imagined that Sang Na still held reverence and gratitude towards him in her heart. As for Noah, he stayed in the infirmary as usual when he had nothing to do. After learning of Noah's return, there was quite a commotion in Chariot King Academy. After all, Noah was quite famous among the girls in Chariot King Academy. However, Noah had no time to pay attention to those infatuated girls. That was because Noah needed to start making preparations. What was he going to do? A divine artifact maker. Athena's suggestion must be put on the agenda. Chapter 1858. Although Noah had returned to the Chariot King Academy, he did not help Leah and Cana to repel the enemies. To Noah, they might be terrorists that he could easily get rid of, but to Leah and Cana, or to be more precise, the Jamanli's kin and Seti's kin, it was a battle that they could use to improve themselves. That was why Noah did not help Leah and Cana to deal with the terrorists. He only stayed in the academy. Unless there was an enemy that Leah and Cana could not deal with, Noah did not plan to intervene. Under such circumstances, the Jamanli's kin were still living a rather lively life, while Noah was living a rather leisurely life. He had been living a leisurely life for an entire week. Of course, it was not that Noah did not do anything. In order to create an artificial divine artifact, Noah had asked Sazax and Athathiel to help him gather the materials. However, the one who created the divine artifact was not Noah, but Athena. Although Noah had the method to create artificial divine artifacts, it did not mean that Noah could create them himself. If having a recipe could make delicious food, why would a 5-star chef be needed? It was the same logic. Having the information to create divine artifacts did not mean that Noah could create artificial divine artifacts. Therefore, Noah could not create artificial divine artifacts. But Athena was different. It's done. In one of the rooms in the apartment, Athena came to Noah and looked straight at Noah. Your artificial divine artifact. Upon hearing that, Noah looked at Athena's hand almost immediately. He took a closer look and saw that there was an artifact lying on top of Athena's hand. It was a gauntlet. A gauntlet that was crimson in color and covered in red scales. It looked extremely ferocious and looked like a dragon's claw. Noah did not need time to recognize the familiar gauntlet. It was the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. However, compared to the real Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, this ferocious crimson gauntlet was just an outer appearance. Because there was no shining jade on the back of the gauntlet. Looking at the crimson gauntlet that lacked jade, Noah muttered to Athena. This is the artificial divine artifact you created? Sacred gear. It was created by the God of the Bible to possess a special power that was out of the norm. Although most of them appeared in the form of an artifact, they were actually a special ability that only manifested in the form of an artifact. Among the numerous divine artifacts, there were only 13 divine artifacts that stood at the very top and possessed the ability to threaten even gods and demon kings. That was what people called the 13 types of the divine artifacts. Longinus. Of the highest level of the divine artifacts. And the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear was one of them. The divine artifacts left behind by the God of the Bible were truly incredible. At least, among so many mythological systems, only the God of the Bible had successfully created a divine artifact that allowed humans to obtain extraordinary power. Even individuals with Longinus could obtain the possibility of killing gods. This incredible power could not be replicated by any god. Including those who were at the top of the world, they were the same. However, after years of research, Asashel figured out a way to create divine artifacts. That was artificial divine artifacts. It was a pity that most of the artifacts made by Asashel were useless trash. Even if there was any power, it was just some insignificant ability. There were very few artificial divine artifacts that could be used in battle. In this situation where even ordinary divine artifacts were difficult to create, it was simply a joke to create an artificial divine artifact like Longinus. However, Athena managed to do it. There's nothing to be surprised about. Athena's expression was unremarkable. Although the divine artifacts in this world can only be created by the God of the Bible, in my original world, most of the divine artifacts used by the gods were created by the gods themselves. I'm not the god of invention, nor the god of creation, nor the god of forging, but I'm still the goddess of wisdom. Athena's pair of coquettish snake eyes revealed the unique pride and confidence of a god. Since there's already the method to create artificial divine artifacts here, and I'm an elf, I've transformed into an elf device similar to a divine artifact more than once. Combined with your experience and memory of using the weapon refinement method to create this gauntlet, it's still possible to recreate its form. Of course, this is just a form without any power. Athena looked at Noah. However, as long as you embed the red sky dragon's dragon jade in this gauntlet, then this gauntlet will be able to recreate the power of the sky dragon's soul. In other words, without Drake's soul, this gauntlet would just be a model. However, once it was embedded with Drake's soul, this gauntlet would be instantly activated and become a divine artifact that had disappeared the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. By then, Noah would be able to obtain the power of the Red Dragon Emperor once again. Although this gauntlet would be useless without Drake's soul, it was already shocking enough for Athena to be able to recreate the power of Drake's soul. Of course, this is still an artificial divine artifact after all. Even with the Sky Dragon's soul as the material, as long as it's created, it will still have a lot of limitations compared to a real divine artifact. Athena smiled happily. However, I already knew this before I started creating it, so I just directed its limitations in a direction that can be controlled. It was like making a wooden barrel, but there would definitely be a plank that was shorter than the rest. Athena's method was that since there had to be a shortcoming, then she would decide where to pin it. I will infinitely increase the consumption of energy when using this artificial divine artifact. Through this method, I will determine its limitations and increase its performance to the same level as a real divine artifact. Athena's eyes flashed with wisdom. If someone else were to use this artificial divine artifact, even if that person was a god, they would only be able to use it once before collapsing and dying instantly. However, for you, who has the third perpetual motion machine and unlimited stamina and magic power, no matter how much energy you consume, it won't affect you at all. For others, this is a useless piece of trash, but for you, it is a divine artifact that is no different from a real divine artifact. Athena handed the gauntlet to Noah. Believe me, it will definitely be of help to you. After saying that, Athena turned into a beam of light particles and turned into a small platinum sword. Then, she disappeared from the spot. Noah gripped the small platinum sword that suddenly appeared in his hand and smiled bitterly as he spoke softly. Thank you, Athena. After saying this, Noah kept the platinum sword in his bestowment card and looked at the gauntlet in his hand. Noah didn't feel any energy from the gauntlet. Athena was right, the gauntlet was just a model. Noah flipped his hand and took out a piece of dragon jade. You should have heard what I said just now, right? Noah said. Is this okay? Drager? It's better than sleeping in this piece of dragon jade, right? Drager's deep voice came from the flickering dragon jade. It depends on whether you are willing to fight with me again, partner. Hearing this, Noah smiled. Do I have any reason to refuse? After saying this, Noah embedded the dragon jade with Drager's soul into the groove on the back of the gauntlet. Gotcha! With a crisp sound, the dragon jade was perfectly embedded into the groove and was firmly fixed in place in an instant. Clank! A blinding light bloomed from the red gauntlet. Chapter 1859. Clank. Under the dazzling crimson light, Noah's arm covered by the crimson light began to deform. The light gathered on Noah's arm and finally converged into a rather ferocious shape. When the red light dissipated, a ferocious crimson gauntlet appeared on Noah's arm. Wang! As the gauntlet trembled slightly, the dragon jade on the back of his hand also flickered. Boost! The sound effect with Drager's voice sounded from the dragon jade. In the next second, Noah clearly felt a familiar power flowing through his body. Under the influence of that power, Noah's strength suddenly soared, and it doubled in an instant. Feeling the familiar power, Noah slowly raised the corner of his mouth and looked at the dragon jade in the gauntlet. Drager, how do you feel? I don't feel any discomfort. Drager's voice revealed a hint of joy. No, I feel more comfortable and carefree than before. It's really incredible. In the past, Drager was sealed in the artifact and his power was forcibly extracted to become a tool for the owner to use. Now, although Draeger could only live in the Jade, he was no longer in the form of being sealed. His degree of freedom had increased a lot and he naturally felt more comfortable and carefree. Really? Noah said with some surprise. I thought you would feel a little uncomfortable being forcibly extracted from the depths of your soul. But, it's different from before. I'm just a pure soul now and the soul doesn't have any power. Therefore, the feeling of the power bursting out from the depths of my soul and being extracted is actually not uncomfortable. Instead, it makes me feel physically and mentally comfortable. Draeger seemed to be experiencing the current feeling. Compared to before, it's really much more comfortable. Is that so? Noah nodded thoughtfully. Then how is the function of the artifact compared to before? Because the memories engraved in the depths of my soul are extracted and turned into power, there isn't much difference in terms of ability and performance compared to before. Draeger said. No, because there are no messy restrictions, the power I can unleash is even stronger. The only problem is that the consumption is too shocking. With this level of consumption, let alone an ordinary human, even a god or a demon king might collapse after using it. In this way, it's impossible for anyone other than you to use me. Just like Draeger said, the consumption of the booster gear was too shocking. Even if he didn't do anything, Noah could still feel his physical strength and magic power constantly depleting just by conjuring the artifact like this. If he were to use the power of the artifact, he would only need to double the power once, and even a god or a demon king would fall instantly. Therefore, other than Noah, no one else would be able to use the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. However, just like what Athena said. For Noah, who had unlimited stamina and magic power, this artifact was no different from the real, Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear. No. According to Draeg, because it was a man-made artifact, it did not need to be affected by the messy restrictions left behind by the artifact system of the Heaven Realm. The power that this, Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, could unleash was undoubtedly stronger. You can use the booster gear once every 10 seconds. This aspect hasn't changed much, but there is a time limit to fighting in the booster gear state. If you could only fight for 1 minute in the booster gear state before, now you can fight for 10 minutes. Draeger's report kept coming. It's the same for transferring power. If you could only use it for 1 minute in the past, now you can still use it for 10 minutes. There are fewer restrictions in terms of time, so the practicality is undoubtedly higher. What about the booster gear? Noah asked. Can the booster gear be used as usual? It can be used, but the consumption is definitely enough to make an eternal god die instantly. It's too scary, but it has no effect on you. I really don't know what to say. Draeger's voice became heavy. In addition, other than the booster gear, it seems like the Tyrannosaurus Rex can also use it. The Tyrannosaurus Rex can be used? Noah was startled at first, but then he was pleasantly surprised. Booster gear, balance breaker. Just by looking at the translation, one could understand what it meant. After all, the so-called balance breaker, booster gear, originally had the meaning of balance breaker, destroyer of balance. Only when the owner's thoughts and desires were strong enough to reverse the flow of the world, the artifact could reach this realm. That was the ultimate realm of the artifact. In other words, the highest realm of the artifact was the booster gear. However, in some of the artifacts, there was a power that was even stronger than the booster gear. That was the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Only the artifact that sealed a monster could have a power that was stronger than the booster gear. Generally speaking, the artifact that sealed a monster would have a strong seal on it. This was because if it wasn't sealed, the artifact's power would be too strong, and it would bring an unimaginable burden to the owner, leading to the owner's death. The so-called Overlord was the ability to forcibly remove the seal temporarily, and completely release the sealed monster's power. This kind of forcibly obtained power naturally had a great risk. Not only would it absorb the owner's life, if it couldn't be controlled, it would also cause the owner to go berserk, and it would only stop when the owner died. The Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear was one such artifact. Therefore, the Red Dragon Emperor, one of the 2 sky dragons, could also use the Overlord. Because the monster sealed within was a sky dragon, the red dragon emperor's boosted gears, tyrant, could be called that. Juggernaut drive. As long as it was used, it would be able to obtain a power that could even destroy gods and demon kings for a short period of time. Now that I no longer have the seal left by the God of the Bible, the power engraved in the depths of my soul can be reproduced by the artifact. Naturally, the Tyrannosaurus can also use it. However, the Tyrannosaurus is still a cursed power. Let's not talk about the consumption, but it won't affect you. However, the Tyrannosaurus will also take the user's life, and even cause the user to go berserk. I don't recommend you to use it. In the past, you seem to have mentioned that your physique is immune to all side effects. Even the Tyrannosaurus can't affect you. Delag advised. However, even if you can avoid the life-taking side effects, the Tyrannosaurus can still cause the user to go berserk. It's best that you don't use it. Even if you want to use it, it's best that you find a way to prevent yourself from going berserk. Otherwise, you'll be in big trouble. Hearing Delag's advice, Noah nodded heavily. Although the Tyrannosaurus power was very strong, and Noah's physique was also immune to most of the Tyrannosaurus side effects, as long as the side effects weren't completely eliminated, there was still a risk. Just like what Delag said, it was best to explore it for the time being. Also, there's a piece of good news. Delag laughed. Apart from multiplication and transfer, the gauntlet has awakened a third ability, partner. A third ability? Noah was stunned. The gauntlet has a third ability apart from multiplication and transfer? Noah had never heard of such a thing before. That's right. That's something that has never happened since ancient times. Delag said. When the two heavenly dragons were sealed into the divine artifact by the God of the Bible, their abilities were split into several parts. Only multiplication and transfer can be used. The white part can only use multiplication and transfer. However, right now, I'm just a spirit body. I don't have any power to begin with. The power I'm displaying now is all reproduced by the artifact. Delag smiled. Therefore, even the third ability from when you were alive has been reproduced. This was indeed a rare piece of good news. What kind of ability was it? Noah began to look forward to it. Chapter 1860. Time passed quietly as Noah figured out the power of the new gauntlet. When it was almost time for class, Noah came out of his apartment and walked in the direction of Chariot King Academy. Originally, Isha and Kitten lived with Noah. Before she was reincarnated as a demon, she had nowhere else to go, so she joined Noah and became Noah's family. Kitten, on the other hand, was arranged by Leah to keep an eye on Noah before Noah was trusted by her. After Leah and the others returned from the underworld, Isha and Kitten stayed with Leah and Zhu Nai at Leah's invitation. After all, Noah had not returned at that time, and the Calamity Squad had been attacking. Leah could not be at ease letting Isha and Kitten live alone in the apartment. So, the next day, Isha and Kitten stayed with Leah and Zhu Nai under Leah's hospitality. Later, in order to be able to deal with the Calamity Squad's attacks at any time, Leah bought a mansion and let all the girls of the Jamanli family live together. As for Yudu and Gasper, because they were men, they also lived together in a house next to Leah and the others. After Noah returned, Isha and Kitten wanted to continue living with Noah. Unfortunately, the Calamity Squad was still as annoying as before. They attacked almost every day, and the Jamanli family were busy fighting every day. Under such circumstances, in order to save time, Isha and the Kitten were left behind by Leah and the others. They did not move back to Noah's apartment. Isha was very reluctant to do so, and even Kitten seemed to be a little reluctant. In the end, the two girls had no choice but to continue living with the girls of the Jamanli family. Naturally, Noah did not object. It was not that Noah hated living with Isha and Kitten, but his apartment was just an ordinary room to begin with. It was a little difficult for three people to live in it. In the past, he had always slept on the floor. Moreover, living with friends of the same age would undoubtedly be happier, right? When Noah said this, Isha was in tears, and even Kitten glared at Noah fiercely. It's not like that. Isha, teacher is really an idiot. Kitten, these were the words that Isha and Kitten left for Noah. In any case, Noah had finally returned to a life where he could sleep in a bed. Although he had slept in all kinds of harsh environments when he was cultivating in the mountains and forests, no one would choose to sleep on the floor when there was a comfortable bed to sleep in. Moreover, living with a cute girl is also a test for me. Walking on the sidewalk on the side of the street, Noah sighed. At this moment, there was a commotion in front. Noah was slightly taken aback, and he immediately raised his head to look in front of him. He saw that there was a group of students who were preparing to go to the academy like Noah. They were all wearing the uniforms of the Jumanli Academy, and they were all gathered together and chatting with one another. Upon closer inspection, he saw that there was a petite and cute girl standing in the middle of the crowd. It was a very petite girl with waist-length straight black hair. She wore a black dress that revealed her slender limbs. She looked very cute and looked to be about 11 or 12 years old. What a cute girl. What's your name? Did you get lost from your mother? Did you lose your way? Where do you live? Can we take you back? Due to the girl's adorable appearance, the female students of the Jumanli Academy seemed to have developed feelings of affection for her, and they all gathered around her to talk to her. However, looking at the petite girl, Noah's eyes suddenly narrowed. At the same time, the petite girl in the crowd seemed to have noticed Noah, and she turned her head to look in Noah's direction. Immediately after, the young girl's eyes never left Noah's direction. She pointed at Noah, and like a quiet moonlit night, she spat out words that were pleasing to the ear but did not contain the slightest trace of emotion. I've found you, Drager. The Drager the girl was referring to was Noah. There was only one person who used this name to call Noah. The #1 powerhouse in the world, the infinite dragon god known as the strongest existence Orpheus. Yes. The petite girl was Orpheus. As the leader of the disaster squad, and also known as the strongest existence, Orpheus appeared openly on the crowded street, surrounded by a group of extremely ordinary female students, and treated like a little girl. Orpheus's action made all the girls in Full King Academy turn to look at Noah. Teacher. Teacher Noah. It's really Teacher Noah. Ah. Teacher Noah. Teacher. The group of infatuated female students immediately screamed like fans who had seen their idol. That passionate look not only made the people around the street look at Noah strangely, but even Orpheus was stunned. He tilted his head, and had a puzzled look on his face. Noah finally reacted. Looking at the confused Orpheus, he took a deep breath, suppressed the confusion and shock in his heart, and walked forward. Teacher. Teacher is coming. He's coming. The female students of Chariot King Academy blushed. Noah was not in the mood to complain, and said to the surrounding students, Sorry, I'm sorry. This is a child I know, just leave her to me. You can all go to school. Yes. Teacher. The group of students immediately nodded their heads. Then, they screamed excitedly as they left. It seemed like being able to talk to Noah made these infatuated female students very excited. After a while, the bustling streets returned to normal. Only Noah and Orpheus were left facing each other, looking at each other. After a while, Noah asked the question that he wanted to ask the most. Why are you here? To look for you. Orpheus did not hide anything, and said in her usual emotionless tone. I sensed your aura. So, I came to look for you. Although Orpheus did not say this out loud, Noah could feel it. Perhaps it was because of the completion of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, that the dragon's aura leaked out slightly. Orpheus must have sensed that aura, so she came over, right? Then, why are you looking for me? Noah stared at Orpheus. Do you want to take me away by force like last time? No. Orpheus shook her head. Orpheus shook his head. Although his tone was calm and monotonous, it gave off an unfathomable vibe. I don't know why, but I don't have the urge to take you away now. That was of course. Previously, the reason why Orpheus wanted to take Noah away by force was because the world fragment was lodged in her body. The strong feeling of wanting to be taken back by Noah affected Orpheus' subconscious, causing Orpheus to be obsessed with Noah. That was why she did that. Now that the world fragment had been taken back by Noah, Orpheus naturally would not have that kind of impulse. But, I'm very curious about you. Orpheus stared straight at Noah and said. Other than it, there's actually a dragon that can threaten me. I'm very curious about this. The it that Orpheus mentioned referred to the existence that was not in this world or even belonged to this world that was mentioned earlier. Other than that existence, there was no other individual stronger than Orpheus. And that existence was also a dragon. For Orpheus, only that dragon could be a match for her. She probably did not care about the rest. However, Noah destroyed Orpheus' idea. There's nothing strange about it, right? A voice suddenly sounded from the side. If it were me, I would also be interested in the existence that is stronger than me. This is the so-called dragon, right? Along with such a voice, a silver-haired man slowly walked out from an alley next to them. His eyes were fixed directly on Noah, and the corners of the man's mouth curled up slightly. Long time no see, Noah Doria. You're here too. Noah was not surprised at the other party's appearance at all, and his gaze turned to him. Wally Lucifer. The person who came was Wally, who possessed the power of the White Dragon Emperor and Lucifer at the same time. Chapter 1861. Previously, Sazax had already told Asashel that there was a group of teammates gathered around Wally. Moreover, Orpheus was also currently acting with Wally. In that case, even Orpheus had appeared, so it wasn't surprising that Wally was around. Not only Wally, but Noah also felt that there were more or less restless auras around him. Each of those auras was very powerful. They were at least much stronger than the superior demons, and each of them had to be at the level of the most superior demons. As for the number, there were about 4 or 5. There were actually 4 or 5 of them who were at least at the level of the most superior demons. Coupled with Wally, if these guys launched an attack on this town, even if the Jumanlis and Sidi's families attacked together, it would be absolutely impossible for them to win. Not to mention, there was also the almost invincible existence of Orpheus here. Sensing the restless auras, Noah glanced at Wally and said calmly, "Don't worry, Wally, I'm not going to let you go, Wally. You're quite well prepared. Have you found the traces of my teammates?" Wally shrugged. "I knew I couldn't hide it from you, but don't worry, we won't make a scene on the street. My teammates aren't that interested either. They just came with me and Orpheus to see what the Crimson Dragon Emperor who can even rival the Dragon God looks like." Can even rival the Dragon God? Noah asked with a spurious smile. Undoubtedly, I lost miserably the last time, and I believe you can also see that the power I displayed at that time had a time limit. Can I take it that you're mocking me for saying that? At least, you did achieve a certain level of strength that is comparable to Orpheus. This is an indisputable fact. Otherwise, Orpheus wouldn't be curious about you. Wally looked at Noah with a burning gaze. Besides, I heard that after that, you went through special training again, and only returned to the human world not long ago. Now, you should be stronger, right? What's wrong? Noah didn't answer the question. You want to challenge me again? I just wanted to tell you that you're not the only one who's improving. In order to catch up with you, I've also given it my all during this period of time. I believe that you'll be shocked sooner or later. Varley turned his gaze to Orpheus. I'm only here to accompany Orpheus today. Unless you want to fight, I won't do anything. Your words sound better than your song. Noah curled his lips. Undoubtedly, the cluster of disasters has been attacking this town all this time, hasn't it? We didn't do it, Wally said straightforwardly. That's what the hero faction did. Hero faction? Noah's heart stirred. After this period of confrontation, the demons, angels, and fallen angels had more or less grasped some information about the disaster. It was said that there were many factions in the group of disasters. After all, dangerous members of various forces gathered in the group of disasters. Not only were there demons, angels, and fallen angels, but there were also terrorists from humans and other mythical forces. Although Orpheus existed as the leader on the surface, this infinite dragon god seemed to have no interest in managing the organization at all. He only provided the members of the organization with snakes that could increase their strength. Other than that, he was not interested in anything else. Therefore, in the group of disasters, the terrorists of every force gathered together, allowing the warlords of the kingdom of disasters to run rampant. Among them, there were two factions with the most power. One was the old Demon King faction that believed in the 4 demon kings who died in the ancient war together with the God of the Bible. However, the leaders of the old Demon King faction, who inherited the bloodlines of the old demon kings Beelzebub, Leviathan, and Asmodeus, were all taken down because of a failed attack on the 3 forces during the last peace treaty. Only Varley, who inherited the bloodline of Lucifer, was left. Varley, on the other hand, had no interest in leading the demons of the old Demon King faction to usurp the political power of the current demon realm, causing the old Demon King faction to fall apart. Now, its power in the group of disasters was greatly reduced and was no longer considered strong. The other faction was the hero faction. Just like the old Demon King faction that gathered the demons who believed in the old Demon King, the so-called hero faction referred to the faction that gathered the descendants of the former heroes and brave people. All the members gathered in this faction had the bloodline of humans, and almost every one of them had psionic abilities. Either they were humans with special physiques, or they were humans with special bloodlines, or they were humans who could use magic and magic, or they were humans who had divine artifacts. The internal members were all humans. The people of the hero faction have an unusual obsession with the identity of humans, and are proud of their bloodline. There are 2 reasons why they attacked this town. Varley stretched out 2 fingers. One is to make the holder of the divine artifact reach the forbidden hand. Make the holder of the divine artifact reach the forbidden hand? Noah raised his eyebrows. They can reach the forbidden hand by attacking a town? This is the first time I've heard of such a thing. The forbidden hand was the ultimate mystery of the divine artifact. It could exert the power of the divine artifact to the limit, allowing the human's power to surpass the level of ordinary demons, angels, and fallen angels. Every divine artifact had its own forbidden hand. But to reach the forbidden hand, it was not so simple. If the holder of the divine artifact's heart and feelings did not reach a certain degree of drastic change, to the extent that even the flow of the world changed, then it was impossible to reach the forbidden hand. It was said that among all the holders of the divine artifact, less than 1% of them could reach the forbidden hand. In this way, how could the forbidden hand be achieved so easily? Naturally, the forbidden hand isn't something that can be achieved easily. That's why the hero faction used very extreme methods. As a member of the same organization, I won't reveal the specifics to you. However, Asashel should be almost done with his investigation. You can ask him yourself. Wally retracted a finger. I'll tell you the second reason why the people of the hero faction attacked this town. That is to lure you out. Lure me out? Noah finally showed a surprised expression. The goal is me? That's right. Varley nodded. As I said, the people of the hero faction are very obsessed with the identity of human, and they are very proud of their own bloodline. Because from ancient times to the present, those who can defeat the demon king, demons, and magical beasts have always been heroes and brave, so only humans are gathered in their faction. With that said, Varley stared at Noah closely. Under such circumstances, if there is a human who can do such a shocking thing as killing a god, do you think that those guys will not be interested in you? Noah slowly narrowed his eyes. You should have a little self-awareness. The Lord God of the Northern mythology system can come for you, the dragon god Orpheus, who is known as the infinite dragon god, can come for you, I can come for you, so others will also come for you. You have long been an existence that no one can ignore, Varley said. I just want to tell you that the people of the hero faction have been eyeing you. If you don't pay attention, you may capsize in the gutter." Noah was silent. After a while, Noah asked, "Why are you telling me these things? This is just a deal." Varley pointed to Orpheus, who had been staring at Noah. "You also saw that Orpheus is very interested in you. It seems that he doesn't plan to go with me. In that case, let Orpheus stay by your side." "Let Orpheus stay by my side?" Noah couldn't help but be surprised. "Are you kidding? Or do you want to stop it?" Varley said indifferently. "Then you have to fight with Orpheus here. Does that not matter?" Noah's brows furrowed deeply at once. "Don't worry, Orpheus has no desire to fight with you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to see you like this." Varley suddenly smiled. "I hope you can get along well with the dragon god, my biggest enemy." Leaving this sentence, Varley turned around and walked into the alley, completely disappearing into the shadows. At the same time, the powerful auras around him also disappeared. Only Noah and Orpheus were left there. They looked at each other, and both of them remained silent. They were speechless. Things began to develop in a wonderful direction. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.